Neighbor Karen gets evicted. So I'd shared parts of this previously, but there were updates I never got to finish. It is not a short one, but it is very satisfying. TLDR, our duplex neighbor was a pain in the ass, so we tormented her for nearly a year. She eventually got herself evicted. I shared a duplex with my then GF and her son, 7. To fully understand all of this I have to lay out the geography. This is a single house duplex with both doors in the middle with a shared small front porch. The house was built on the side of a hill. Our half was on the uphill side. So underneath the other unit are both garages, side by side. The sidewalk comes up from the garages in front of the other unit directly onto the shared front porch. There's also a back porch, but it has a divider, so we share a moderate amount of privacy. We got a new neighbor one day, but didn't meet her until a couple weeks after she'd moved in. We'll call her Karen. She's mid-late 50s, skinny, and has cats. Lots of cats. We can see them in the windows. Our meeting went as such. One day we're out washing our cars in the front yard. Me, the GF, her kid. The hose wouldn't reach the driveway. I also have a pair of motorcycles that I'm washing, too. They will be important later. We're having a fun afternoon in the sun, playing with the hose. You know the scene. All kinds of cute happy. This is when our new neighbor comes home. Karen drives along the driveway, parks in the garage, and walks up the sidewalk where we are. We politely introduce ourselves, and even joke that if she pulls her car up here we'd wash it, too. She all but ignores us and walks straight to her door. We shrug it off, but then she returns and goes straight vapor lock, setting the mood for the rest of the year. She starts nagging in an angry, almost screaming tone that she doesn't want us on her half of the yard. We can't be on her half, which included the sidewalk, since it went through her half of the front yard. We needed to get off her side of the yard. Since the sidewalk was on her half, it was hers and we couldn't use it. We would have to go around the back to get to her door. That's not happening. And she also wants us to stop using the garage door opener because she doesn't like the noise it makes when we do. That's obviously not happening. She's pissing off my GF and scaring her kid. I have to calm them both down and get them inside while Karen is still yelling with a jabbing finger. Now I'm an easygoing guy, I can let it roll off, but the GF kid didn't deserve that. I got them both to calm down. He needed ice cream, she needed a beer smoke, and Karen needed to be taught a lesson. I go to put the car's bikes away. It's during this that I can hear Karen through the garage ceiling on the phone with what I can only assume is our landlord, bitching about how rude and insufferable we are. We scare her cats really and we keep running the garage door and it bothers her. She doesn't like it. We just have to go. The light bulb goes off. Both of my bikes are carbureted, and for the life of me, I can't remember the last time I had them adjusted. Since car washing was cut short, maybe I can do that instead. I pull mine and the GF's car out of the garage. I'm going to need the space. Then I park the bikes side by side, exhaust pipes facing into the garage. I break out the tools, and start with the little one. She's a 2001 V-Star 1100 Classic. I named her Molly. Vance Hines pipes, but they're still pretty loud. I crank Molly up and wail on that throttle while I fine-tune the throttle body, just ripping it as loud as she can, filling that garage with all of the noise. Keep that up for a few minutes, then let her rest a minute. When I finally put Molly to bed, I can finally hear Karen stomping on the floor and yelling at me. I yell back, "Okay, Karen, just one more to go. Only be a few minutes." Then I turn my attention to Black Betty. She's the '08 Vulcan Mean Streak Limited Edition. She's an 1800. She has pipes too, but the baffles may or may not have been drilled out. Before I can crank it up, I hear her calling what I assume is the LL and yelling that she doesn't care about Elise. She wants us kicked out. She just won't stand for it. I didn't catch the rest of it as Betty was clearing her throat. I gave up the subterfuge of actually working on it and just held the throttle open for a moment, then rest, then throttle, then rest. Kept that up until my own ears started ringing. Then put the vehicles away. She was still stomping on the floor and talking on the phone. I assume this was someone other than the LL because she's retelling the same story again. Also, did I mention that we're friends with the landlord? Yeah, so once I'm back inside, the GF is on the phone with him. We tell our side. He laughs at my prank with the bike, then asks me not to do that anymore. We finish off the evening with some TV while Karen is still screaming. Her voice is wavering as though she might be angry crying. In the coming months it only got worse, but in that moment, the most committed of meth heads could not match me for the endorphin rush I got from hearing her rant and squeal. A few days later, I'm out on my way to work. I leave at about 6 to make it in time to have breakfast at the desk before I log on at 7. I go around to the garage, and Karen has left her car outside her garage and positioned it so I can't get my car out. I knock on her door, and of course she doesn't answer. Bang on it a few more times. Nothing. I even yell at the door, "Hey Karen, you're blocking my car. I need to get to work." This is clearly her petty revenge for the bikes, I'm sure. Good shot, Karen. Good one. Fortunately it's a nice day so I can just take one of them to work. The bike can fit around her car. But thanks to her, I wasn't going to have time to enjoy my breakfast once I got there. That evening, I came home and her car was still there. So instead of putting it back in the garage, I leave the bike parked behind her car, just at the edge of the street. Now I know what you're thinking, but what if she backs into it? And I was kinda hoping that was where it would go. See, I've got great insurance and an even better lawyer. But no, this is how petty she is. She calls the cops. Come knock on our door. Push the bike over. Go through the front yard. No, calls the cops. The nice policeman informs me that I'm blocking her car from exiting. Yeah, that was kinda the point. I inform him that she started it. I felt like a kid saying that. And honestly, we would have called the police on her for this shit this morning. But it seemed juvenile, and a waste of their time. Also, I had to get to work. Cops' response: yes, but that's why we're here. That's just sad. Lets me know our species is doomed. Anyway, once I explained the whole thing, Mr. Policeman knocks on her door, addresses himself and gets her to come outside. We explain the whole mess. Cop asks, is this true? She admits it, but can't produce a reason for it. Cop scolds us both for being childish and to stop blocking the driveway. Says he doesn't want to have to come back out to our residence again. Yeah, okay. That weekend, we go over to the neighbors for a few drinks. No, not that one. She doesn't like us. The next duplex over, their porch is about 30 feet or so from the original scene of the crime. We're not being loud, no music, just a handful of us grilling out and drinking beers. Oh, and among the guests this evening is Ariel himself. Did I mention we were in good with him? So anyway, sure enough, the nice policeman comes by. It's not the same officer as time, but the popo nonetheless. He comes to the deck, flashlight in hand. Says he got a noise complaint call. Clearly it was her. But what is rib-bustingly hilarious, is that the officer said the noise complaint was placed by, wait for it, the landlord of the house. Yeah, no shit. Anyways, LL steps forward and says, funny, I don't remember calling to complain about myself. Once again we explain everything to the officer. He chuckles, asks us to keep it down, and leaves. After that, Mr. LL goes over to her unit. Of course she doesn't answer the door, but he speaks loud enough for her to hear, letting her know what she did wasn't cool. After that we tried to avoid one another. There would be minor shit like UPS packages dropped for her. We find it on our side and move it over. Later on we'll hear through the door, keep your hands off my stuff, or other headaches that make us wish her cats would turn on her. Few weeks later I'd gotten a promotion at work, so we threw a party. Sure enough, the cops were called again. This one was not placed by the LL, but he was still there. He yells over at her door, hey Karen, this is getting old. This next instance I can't quite take credit for, but Karen had built this obnoxious awning to cover her side of the porch out back. She never uses the porch, so why bother? However, I clearly remember a stipulation in our lease that says we are not allowed to modify the exterior of the units at all. Maybe hers is different. Maybe I should call LL and find out what's that? No, she doesn't get to make modifications either. Oh well, she did. So he makes her remove it. Again, because we're in good with him, he shares the tale with us. How she bitched, then begged, then relented. It was ear candy. Speaking of candy, come Halloween, I decorated the yard. I had heard from multiple neighbors of ours that their children were frightened of my front yard come Halloween. By this point, I should have guessed, though, that the lines were being drawn with Karen, figuratively and literally. I had to move some of my decorations, and that included the 15-foot ghost on the roof of the unit. I had to move it all the way over onto my side. So come Halloween night, we took her son out trick-or-treating, and literally every kid we saw, we told them to go by her place. She had the good candy, and lots of it, but she's old and hard of hearing, so you'll have to bang the door pretty hard. No, she won't mind. She's a sweet lady. Now, I realize this was also mean to the kids who went to her door, but they were each a worthy sacrifice on the altar of petty revenge. Finale season. It's been about 10 months now. The cops hadn't had to come back out, and no one had been cussed out in a while. One evening, we hear a splatter coming from the kitchen. Go in and find the pipe has busted under the sink and spraying. I quickly go out to the main and close it, but because this is a duplex, I've cut off water to her side as well. She's not home yet, so we call our buddy the LL. He comes and addresses the issue. Small part to fix it. Needs to run to Home Depot. Be right back. Meanwhile I type up a note for Karen's door. I let her know we had a leak, had to shut off the water, but it should be fixed within an hour or two. Even thanked her for her understanding. While he's gone we clean up the water. It was a lot. Then, before he returns we hear the splatter again. At first, I'm a little confused. I know I turned it off, but then it clicks. I go outside, and there's Karen holding a pipe wrench. Hey, didn't you see my note? Yes. But my cats need water. Yes, but now you're flooding our unit. I need water. My GF comes out and goes off shouting, calling her a bitch. Next door neighbors hear and come out. It's a show. Now, I go get my wrench to close the main valve again. But she won't move out of the way. She's literally blocking me. I half expect her to take her wrench to my head, so I back off. Sure enough, LL arrives at the shit show. Hey, we left her a note. She ignored it and started the water again. Wait, she what? Then he turns to light into her, cussing her out. I take advantage of her distraction to go kill the water again. But at this point the damage is done. It's been running long enough that the carpets are soaked, and the water is pouring out the front door. Meanwhile LL is still yelling at her. Alright, Karen, that's it. You're out of here. This is your 30 days. Bullshit. I've already signed next year's lease, but I haven't yet. It's worthless. Tear it up. And I'm taking your deposit to pay for their damages. She melts. But, I don't have anywhere else to go. She continues to argue and cry about her deposit. She'll need that for her next apartment. She can't afford to move. She threatens small claims court to get it back. The argument rages on while I take GF's son to go get packed. We can't stay here tonight. We spent the next couple of nights at a hotel while the carpets were redone. He bought the beer ribs for the next barbecue. Few more weeks go by without so much as a peep from her. One day we come home and she's just gone. Porch, garage, and apartment all cleaned out. I'm almost disappointed she didn't say goodbye. Don't want your dogs poop in my yard. Have it back. We had a neighbor who thought he was completely entitled. His parents owned 2 houses next door to each other. One was next door to us, and they were allowing him to live in the one on their other side to us. The dad wanted him to pay rent. The mother would let him slide. The dad wanted him to pay his own utilities. The mom would sneak money to him to pay them. He was married and cheated on his wife. While parents were out of house, because work was being done, he was fooling around in their house. The dad had asked us to watch the house because, as the dad said, he's got his behind stuck in quicksand and I can't trust him to give a damn. So when we heard noise, a crash, and heard voices, we called the cops. The son was caught in the act by the cops. The dad was called and he had the son arrested for trespassing. Oh, and the son's wife was pregnant at the time with their second. She left a few days later, now happily married and is doing great. We had fruit trees and vines in our backyard. The son would decide to come over when his kids were there and just start depleting them, without even knocking and saying, hey, is it okay, or even it's just me. I was here with 2 small children, 5 years, 1 year, putting them down for nap, bedroom in front of house so could not see, only hear stuff being moved, a ladder being pulled out and what was said, hearing a loud voice from my backyard saying, go ahead, take it all on ya. I called police. So, that's trespassing too. We didn't pursue it, but the cops did. But this guy still held it against us. We didn't know, but he had gotten some other offenses for public drunkenness, threatening people, and there were others. He decided to get a dog, for the sole purpose of walking it up to our yard and having it poop in it. We had a 5-year-old, a 1-year-old at the time. Them going into the yard finding his dog's poop everywhere was just gross and insane. He somehow convinced his neighbors on his other side, who also has dogs, that they should do it as well. How to deal with this? Unless we could record him in a act, there wasn't any way to take it to police. So I dealt with it like we would back in the day. I made up a special recipe of dried peppers, cumin, paprika, and curry powders. With this I split it in half. One half was shaken on the grass ground where the dogs would go. The other half was steeped in boiling hot water, dyed bright green, and I soaked it up into cotton balls. To be clear, none of this is bad for dogs. I love dogs. If they sniff this, it isn't a good smell and they will move on. It isn't even something they would want to taste. It might make them sneeze or eyes water if they keep sniffing, but that's about it. They will move on to somewhere they like the smell. The other thing we did was collect each and every piece of poop into paper boxes. I would toss the powder cotton balls out on the yard every couple days. Their other neighbor saw me out, asked about the bright green balls, so I told them, oh yeah, we've had a bunch of grass die recently, so this is that stuff, you know, that kills pests and fertilizes and such. Their dog starts coming closer. Oh hey man, please don't let them eat any. I'm putting signs out, but it can be poisonous to dogs. Not deadly, but yeah, they'll get the runs and stuff. Next was small signs saying warning. Fertilizer should not be ingested. Amazingly, no dogs were poop in our yard anymore, but the entitled neighbor did try one last-headedness. He brought his dog up at about 11 p.m. and had it poop behind our car street parking. Both my spouse and I were outside in the yard, just sitting enjoying the night, and saw this. So, this is the moment those boxes were waiting for. My spouse jumped up, quickly grabbed a shovel, made sure neighbor saw the shoveling up. It was glorious, the look on his face that he was yet again busted for being a crappy person. We grabbed the boxes, followed him down the street. When he got to his front door he turned around and said, "So what are you going to do? Give me back that pile." "So what?" And that's when we dumped out the boxes and said, "Oh no, we're giving you back all the piles. Any that show up in the future, we'll be sure to give back to you as well. Have a good night," and walked back home. We never saw any in our yard again. Sent a job offer to my old boss and he was fuming. Doctor worked a construction job and the boss a choleric prick that told me I'd never amount to anything. When he eventually destroyed his own company, I offered him a job interview at the company I had started. During my university days I needed a little extra income and I heard from a friend that construction companies never say no to someone wrecking their body from them. So I called around and within a few days I got a job interview at a local big-ish construction company, who mainly built private houses and apartment buildings. A few days later I went over there and met some of the crew and my future boss, who seemed really cool and nice at the time. Let's call the boss Bob, not his real name. I got the job offer and gladly accepted. I'm not exactly skilled when it comes to manual labor, but I'm 6 feet 7 inches and I can haul stuff all day. Any builder is happy when there's dumb tall ogre who carries materials and tools to the 6th floor for them. Me carry stuff good. I also drove the van, picked up stuff from the hardware stores, cleaned up, etc. The first few months were great. The work was hard and you had to get up real early, but it was satisfying and the pay was pretty good. That all changed when the boss showed up one day and I saw the real him. That guy I met in the job interview put on a happy facade. The real guy had anger issues. As soon as he arrived he started chewing people out over the dumbest shit, just to vent his anger somehow. The crew knew how to dodge away from him, so I was the target. He called me all kinds of names and critiqued everything I did. After about an hour he drove off. I found out that was a semi-regular occurrence. By the third or fourth time I had enough. Once again he was screaming his head off, and I quit right there on the spot. He proceeded to shout something like, "You're never gonna amount to anything. Don't come crawling back when you fail at your next job." As I walked away, the next morning I had 5 missed calls by the time I woke up and endless text messages about from him. "You're really not coming in?" Lots of name calling, and once again, "You're never going to achieve anything in your life." During my time there I became close friends with a guy working at their office. He was doing a lot of the accounting, scheduling, HR stuff, and pretty much anything that didn't involve actually building the buildings. Let's call that friend Tony, not his real name. Tony had been at the company for a long time and even though he hated the boss, he still stayed there, because he got paid a lot of money and he lived 3 doors down from the office. Fast forward a few years, I was done with university and got a job in my field. It bored me to tears and one night I jokingly said to a friend over a couple of beers that I really missed that construction job. He said that he'd love to start his own construction company, because he had worked in that field in some capacity all his life and had plenty of connections. Add another few beers and we were drawing up drunken plans. I didn't think anything would really come of the drunken plans, because it rarely does. But my friend was all in. He made real plans and wouldn't let go of the idea. Fast forward another few months and we were actually doing it. Tony was kind enough to guide us along the way. I'm not gonna get into the details, but the first few years were rough. I used up every cent I had saved up, but we did it. We elbowed our way into the business. While my company was slowly getting bigger, my Bob's old boss company saw a steady decline. They simply couldn't keep enough people, because Bob was still a choleric maniac, who randomly verbally attacked people. Fast forward a few years of this and they were eventually taken over by a bigger company, mainly for the clients and the people working there. My old boss was allowed to stay on with a temporary contract. If he could improve the business, he would get another contract. He obviously couldn't keep the sinking ship afloat, because he kept punching more holes into it. How do I know all this? Tony gladly sent me daily updates on all the drama. So now it was time for my revenge. Bob's last day on the job. As soon as Bob got into the office, Tony let me know. I still had Bob's number saved, so I sent him a message and offered him a job interview. Imagine the text message history: him endless tirade of name calling and telling me that I'd never amount to anything. 7-ish years pause me. "Hey, I heard you blew up your company and got fired. You need a job? My company link to website can always use unskilled laborers. Let me know if you're interested and we can schedule an interview." The next few hours I was in heaven. I kept seeing the appear and disappear in chat. Tony told me that Bob was pacing up and down the office with a red head that was ready to explode. Bob never actually wrote me back. So here we are 3 years after that. Tony joined my company and we're doing well. We're not huge, but big enough to get contracts and do them well. Bob is still unemployed, because everyone in the industry hates that prick. Our Lamaze teacher was a savage. 21 years ago, My mother-in-law signed my wife and I up for a Lamaze class. We were both early 20s and expecting our first child in a few months. While I'm 100 faithful, it did not escape my attention that the instructor was fine as heck. Even my wife said damn under her breath lol. Girl was a spot-on match for Wolf of Wall Street Margot Robbie. She absolutely infuriated many people by telling them minute one that having a child is not an excuse to keep weight afterward. Instantly offended women pounced on her, saying they're eating for two and what does a 21-year-old Barbie know about this stuff? Instructor calmly replied that eating for two is a myth and excuse, not reality. She explained that at most you're eating for 1.1. And that a massive change in dietary habits is not excusable or necessary. Obviously, that did not go over well to many in the class. They basically ridiculed her looks, youth, and inexperience every week. On the final day, there was a knock on the door at the last minute of class. 5 little blonde youngsters came in. Instructor looked the rudest, also biggest no coincidence lady in her eye and said, "These are my babies. They're 2, 4, 6, 7, and 9. I'm 30 and a registered nurse, and I run 6 miles daily. Thank you for taking my class, and go enjoy your giant dinner and dessert." Then she walked out, smiling the sweetest smile on her way out with them. My wife busted out laughing like a hyena. I thought we were gonna get jumped by 10 angry pregnant women, which got me crying laughing at the absurdity of the idea, especially explaining it to her parents. Thankfully we didn't. Our son was born 3 weeks later, and our awesome instructor happened to be our nurse that day, and she was in the room for every minute of it. Anyway, to this day, that giant dinner line was the best mic drop moment I've ever witnessed. And our instructor is one of our closest friends. Our son is actually dating her youngest daughter, 6 for her. And yes, she's still a knockout. Final thing, nurses are freaking heroes. Our actual doctor was in the room for maybe 15 minutes. Jennifer was by our side for 8 straight hours, and even showed up at our house to check on us. She also wholly admitted that she planned that mic drop the second she heard the dumb Barbie comment, and that her fashion choice of a tight tank top and leggings that day was definitely not a coincidence. Edit: the amount of pure hate she's getting in the comments for literally reading from accredited medical sources is stunning. No offense, but I'm betting some of you are taking out your own personal issues on her. Do yourself a favor and never hire a personal trainer. If you think a nurse was evil for being honest, you wouldn't survive 5 minutes with a PT. Seriously, sometimes people will tell you no. Deal with it. Had she not been attractive, I guarantee you nobody would have complained as much. She was the one being shamed for looks, as crazy as that might sound. Play dumb if you choose, but a lot of you know exactly what I mean. She was getting crossed arms and snobbish looks the second she walked in. She had no chance. The biggest jerk was berating her husband for staring. Insecurity is not an attractive quality, people. 10 years later I got revenge on horrible my landlord. Long story short, landlord was a childish jerk to all of us. He had us sharing about with 4 other people and charged us double while his spoiled son and girlfriend lived rent-free. A few months ago, I had a lawyer contact me and ask if I remembered renting there, and if I'd testify against him. Turns out, he wasn't the true owner of the property. His brother bankrolled all of the properties he told us he owned, and in turn, the landlord was supposed to remodel on time and stay on budget to get the houses sold. Instead, he lived on and wasted the money his brother gave him, and pocketed all of the rent without his brother's knowledge. His face went white when he saw me, and I tripped his lawyer up, who asked me 2 weak questions, then said he didn't have any questions for me. As I left the courtroom, I saw him from the corner of my eye sneer as I walked past, and he very loudly called out to me, a sing-song voice by Sarah, right in front of the jury. Today I learned he lost the entire case. Petty revenge activated. 85 Yo lady sticking it to the man. There's a big new apartment complex going up in the middle of the historic district of town where my Sil lives. It's ugly, loud, has entirely inadequate parking, and is generally hated by everyone who lives in the cute old houses around it. My Sil mentioned today that her neighbor, a salty 85-year-old lesbian with an outsized personality, uses humane rat and mouse traps in the alley behind the corner grocery store and releases anything she finds at the new apartment complex. Don't let anyone tell you you're too old to do your part. 3 ETA. I see a lot of replies saying she's a racist boomer who hates poor people. This apartment complex is asking 2-3x the cost of a normal mortgage for this neighborhood, and isn't even helping the housing crisis because nobody's taking them up on it. Right now it's 90 empty and probably getting some corporate group a big tax write-off for business losses. A barmaid laughed at my drink order. I was on holiday with my son 14 and we were watching the football in a bar in the evening. I don't really drink but do enjoy a cocktail while on holiday. The server came by and asked if we wanted drinks. I asked for a pina colada and she sniggered a little at the order and kind of laughed out an okay, then walked off to make it. This annoyed me a little, I'm just a grown man wanting to drink a tasty cocktail. What's wrong with that? When she brought the drink back, I got my petty revenge. As she was placing the drink on the table, I said, "My mom loved these, God rest her. I always have one on the anniversary of her death to remember her." She looked horrified and tried to shuffle off quickly, so I asked her for a cocktail stirrer, so she had to come back again. When she came back, I took a sip from the straw, kissed my hand and pointed to the sky, trying to look sad. She was so visibly uncomfortably I had to stifle my own laughs. She noticeably avoided our table multiple times after this. A little sick story. Ever since the fate slapped me with early onset menopause, I've been having weird strong reactions to smells. Odors that others won't even be aware of will make me gag. It's not fun, but it's an entirely me problem. I don't police what people spritz themselves with. I just try to avoid the more obnoxious smells when I can. So, I got on an elevator in one of those high-rise multi-office buildings. A couple floors down, a woman joins me. I am instantly hit with a wave of nausea. I know I won't make it 20 more floors to the lobby. So I hit the next floor's button and, as soon as the doors open, I bolt out of there. I take a few deep breaths and catch the next lift down. Well, apparently the woman took offense because, when I got to the lobby, she was waiting to tell me just that. I explained that I was not feeling well, that my only choice was to be sick in front of her or leave. I did not imply this was because of her. She took it personally anyway. She took a step forward, at which point, her perfume filled my nostrils again. I instinctively took a step back. Wrong move. She starts berating me for being rude. I tell her, "Lady, I'm having a reaction to your perfume. Please give me some space." She claps back, "I'm not wearing perfume. I mean, whatever. Soap, shampoo." I'm not here to debate the finer details of her hygiene. I just don't want to smell it. At this point she's so close to me. My eyes are watering, my mouth is filling up with saliva. I can feel my stomach acids crawling up my esophagus. I know that if I just let go, I'm going to feel so much better. So I did. I let it rip. I could have turned my head to hit the floor, but I did not. I hurled all over her chest. I wiped my mouth and walked away. Left her standing there with my half-digested lunch oozing down between her TTS. A new phone system will help me get revenge on my lazy WFH co-worker while I'm on annual leave. My co-worker, let's call him Carl, works on site 2 days a week and works from home 3 days a week. Nobody else in our team is allowed to work from home, and yet management won't force him to work on site all 5 days like the rest of us. He blames childcare and travel expenses as reasons he cannot be on site all 5 days, but many of our team face similar issues and all of them make it on site 5 days a week. Every week. On a semi-frequent basis he'll give one excuse or another as to why he cannot be on site on the days he is supposed to be and therefore has to work from home. Plumbing emergency, child is sick or has an appointment, the dentist. There's always something, but our manager has no backbone and just wants to be everyone's mate, so won't step up and do anything about Carl. As a result, Carl is not well liked in our team. There are some members of the team who have stated they see him so infrequently, they wouldn't be able to pick him out of a lineup. I am the person who takes the brunt of all of this, as I share an office and duties with Carl. I am pretty strict on the division of work to make it as fair as possible, but the balance is never truly equal. I have to handle almost everything that is on site, inducing some very time-consuming postal duties, and end up taking most of the calls because I cannot stand to just let the phone ring. Yes, the phone does transfer to Carl if I don't pick up, but the phone rings for a long time before it cuts to his work mobile cell. In recent months I have put my foot down with management about making sure Carl is on site on the days he is supposed to be, and for a while, it worked. However, he is called out sick twice on those days, once during half-term UK school holiday and once during the Easter break. Of course, nobody can prove he wasn't sick, but the timing was very suspicious. Also, during the Easter break, on the days Carl was working from home, he was left unable to take any calls as his work mobile cell had suddenly stopped working. It would take a while for a replacement to arrive, be set up, and management did not force him to be on site despite him not having a functioning work mobile cell. A combination of these factors, plus some annual leave Carl took, meant I had over 2 weeks of taking every call and doing the large majority of all our duties. When I confronted Carl about the unfairness of all of this, he was dismissive and unapologetic. To add insult to injury, when he was next on site after I went above my manager's head to force Carl to be on site until he had a new work mobile cell, he had the audacity to complain about the job and how he needs to find something better as he's being treated so poorly. It took everything in my power to not roll my eyes right out of my head. Now for the revenge. Yesterday Carl was working from home. Yesterday IT installed new phones in every office. They are not the easiest phones to use and the instruction manual gives basically no information about how the phones work. So I asked my friend in IT to go over it with me, specifically how to change the ringtone and the volume of the ring. My friend in IT also helped me set up a PIN for the phone, and only those that know the PIN can make changes to the phone's setup. On Monday I leave for a 3-week holiday. On Monday Carl is on site and will be every day that I am. On my holiday upper management will be checking to ensure he is in every day. On Friday, before I leave, I am changing the ringtone to the most annoying ring possible. I'll also be turning up the volume as high as possible. And then I'll be locking it all in place with a pin only I will know. I've already tested the phones and the sound of the ring at the highest volume all but vibrates off the walls. When I get home, I will be looking for a new job. I was waiting until after the long holiday to start looking. Fuck you Carl. X200B as a note about why Carl is able to get away with all of this. My major is a pushover, as stated, and just wants to be everyone's mate. Why higher-ups don't try and do more, I do not know, but it may be because employees here are very well protected and very difficult to get rid of. The process to get rid of problem employees can sometimes take years. There are currently several problem employees here that are able to get away with far too much, including one woman who bullies everyone and another is always off sick, to the point where they are off far more frequently than they are in. About 3 years ago I had a contractor rip me off about $2,000. Here is my revenge. It's also still in play. As well, I had a contractor screw me over about $2,000. I downloaded a burner number app. So every few months I'll call this guy from random number, ask about his business and see if he would be willing to work for me. He owns a concrete pumping co. So sometimes I tell him I need a pump at so on a certain day. Ask if he's cool with a check or should I hit the bank for cash. Hook, line and sinker. Then he loads up his equipment and drives an hour to get to a job site that doesn't exist. I almost always send him somewhere I know he has to drive past a friend's home or place of employment. Friend then calls me and tells me head contractor is almost to the site. Every once in a while I'll ask if he can provide a 10-man crew with the pump, as it's just me and grandpa putting in a garage and we are not that good. It's been going on for 3 years now. Labor, fuel, loss of real work. That $2,000 has had to cost him well over $15,000 by now, if not more. I'm in the concrete business. If anyone gives me crap about how cruel I am, oh well, I still sleep pretty good at night. He is not competition in my line of work. He was someone I used to hire to pump crete. He knew he messed up. He said he would make it right, and that was the last time he ever called me or answered a call from my real number. Accidental revenge. I live in an apartment complex with assigned parking in the main parking lot, but plenty of surrounding street parking for visitors, which is only about 30 feet away from the apartment building. Recently visitors have been parking in no parking zones in the lot instead of on the street. This includes people parking half on the sidewalk main road, making it hard to drive out of the lot, in front of the dumpsters and behind already parked cars in their spots. Recently I was walking my dog at night and had to go to the dumpster to throw out the poop bag. There were 2 cars squeezed into the small area in front of the dumpster and no way to get around either car. I'll admit I was annoyed because this wasn't the first time I can't access the dumpsters, but I did the only thing I could to get it in. I flung the poop bag into the open dumpster, but it was dark and my aim was off. The bag landed on the hood of one of the cars. I'm considering it accidental petty revenge. Oh well, accidentally got revenge on an old friend who took my EA account. This happened the start of this year, right? My friends were getting into Apex Legends again, and I hadn't played since the game came out, namely because of a network bug which made it frustrating to play with friends. I got the game to try again. Hopefully my old issues would have been resolved and I could enjoy it, since I did think it was a good game. And when I logged in, I got a big shock because I had forgotten an event that happened years back in secondary school. I let an at the time best friend use my EA account to link to their PlayStation account, right? So both our PlayStation accounts were tied to the one EA. Fast forward a couple of years, I got emails that somebody had changed the password and email address on my EA account. It was the person I used to be friends with. And when I tried to claim it back, I couldn't properly communicate with support as their support pages didn't work properly on iOS, but I didn't care enough to properly pursue getting my account back, as by that point I didn't actually play any EA games anymore. Another few years pass up to this year, and when I loaded up Apex, it loaded me into his account, as EA had merged our 2 separate PS accounts into one profile which we could both play on. I wasn't standing for that, cause they had the cringiest fucking name ever, and also because I wanted to play on my account. So I got onto support again, through a new EA account I had to make, since I lost access to the old one. This time explaining the whole situation, I asked if they could merely unlink my PlayStation account from the old EA account and attach it to my new one. That was my goal. Well, support made me go through a few verification checks and such, making sure I owned the email of the new EA account, and also the original email of my old EA account before it was taken over. They disappeared for about 2 minutes and came back to me. We've sent you a link to change the password on your old EA account and have restored the email to your original email, giving me back control of the account. To which I was like, fuck yeah. But it didn't stop there. Support asked me if there was anything else they could help me with, and I absolutely know the support operator had the biggest shit-eating grin when I responded, could you please unlink the other PlayStation account from the CA one? Because they instantly responded yes, and sent me the big spiel on the consequences of unlinking the account, which included you will lose access to all items and progress in all your EA games. Bear in mind, this guy was like level 220 something, right? I was so fucking giggly at that point, cause I was more than happy to start over, knowing the account was entirely mine and all progress would be mine. There's a big sentimental value to that. Well, I told them to go through with unlinking the account, and excited to use my new Apex account I loaded up my username there in front of me, but also I actually got to keep everything on that person's account. All their skins, all their champions, all their Apex coins, everything. So I got the absolute sweetest revenge by not only getting my account back, but also cucking them out of everything they worked for and getting to keep it all. I've since changed the account's email to my newer one, which I use for personal things, and also activated 2FA to be extra sure. Hands down one of the most satisfying things to ever happen to me. Edit for some additional context and details about the story. When I first got an email that my details had been changed, the message of course includes the new email which my account was now linked to. So I emailed them asking for them to give my account back. I would greatly appreciate if you didn't go changing my account details and instead made your own account. Thanks. Can you please change the account back to my email? And their response was, I'm currently trying to unlink the accounts. Apex gave me a thing about expiry of details, so I put in my email because your account was linked to my PSN from way back when. I'm trying to fix it, sorry. They of course never restored my details after asking and did not unlink the account as they said they were trying to do, instead just keeping my account as their own. I should also mention that I used my EA account to log in with Origin, on which I had several purchases and games, therein losing access to them. Also, this was not a person I ever wanted to engage with anymore, due to the awful way in which they treated our other mutual friends and the people they continued to hang out with during school after. The details of the drama I have admittedly forgotten, so you may take that with a grain of salt on whether you want to believe there was or wasn't, but what I absolutely do remember is them going on and continuing to be good friends with somebody who had said their partner at the time. An unpleasant surprise for my brother after he ruined my plans for a SingStar party. The story happened several years ago. My brother was 14 at the time and I was 18. There was a weekend coming up where our parents weren't there on a Saturday, so I wanted to do an extensive SingStar session with some friends. It was just much more pleasant without parents at home, and we also wanted to enjoy a few beers. The SingStar game belonged to me, but the PlayStation belonged to my brother, who got it for Christmas. I had a gaming PC and was not a console gamer. My brother knew exactly that I had planned this and initially said that I could use his PlayStation for the day. But 2 days before he suddenly said that he needed it himself and wouldn't borrow it. Of course I was annoyed, but he didn't care. Instead he became more and more insolent. I also spoke to my parents, but they said that it wasn't nice of him because he had previously agreed, but at the end of the day it's his PlayStation and I have to accept that. Well, I thought, I'll just look for another date and found the perfect opportunity. A few weeks later we were invited to the silver wedding anniversary of my parents' friends. My brother had talked his way out of it again because he always found this couple quite boring and always begged to stay at home when we visited them, which sometimes worked. He also had a great aversion to formal clothing, which was of course essential for this event. So I thought if I could convince my parents to take my brother to the party instead of me, that would be awesome. Not only would I have the house to myself, it would also be a good revenge on my brother. He still had a suit from the wedding of our Aunt 2 years ago, and I knew he would hate it so bad if my parents forced him into it and drag him along to this silver wedding. I asked my parents about it and suggested that they take him to the wedding instead of me so that I could have the house to myself as compensation for the last time and be able to have a singing star party with friends. And to my surprise, my parents actually liked the idea. My brother had made several missteps lately and had upset our parents, and they thought it was a good opportunity to bring him back down to earth. In the morning of the day of the silver wedding, my brother found out that he had to go there instead of me. Of course he rebelled and fought back desperately, but my parents had the right leverage to quickly break his resistance. It was hilarious how his angry protests quickly turned into self-pitying begging as he tried in vain to convince my parents to at least spare him the bow tie. He looked so grumpy when they left. I, on the other hand, had a really cool day afterwards with some friends, several beers and many hours of SingStar, and the thought of My cheeky brother being trapped in his suit, shirt and bow tie at this silver wedding for hours always brought a smile to my face. He was a bit mad at me for the next few weeks, but that went away and his behavior improved a bit after that too. And now we wait. More petty antics from my dear husband. My family and deals all live in a hurricane-prone area, so everyone has gas cans. My Phil also works on small engines, so he has a lot of gas cans. Phil's sibling is a leech. No other way of putting it. They're the human version of a lamprey with a mouthful of teeth, and when they get a hold of you, they feast on your blood until you have nothing left. This relative is also currently at the center of a family dispute, so not exactly on Phil's good side. They know Phil has all these gas cans. Now, someone take a wild guess who has been taking, draining, and returning these gas cans. My dear husband said, "Mark these gas cans so we know which is which, and water." Now we wait. Apartment parking spot revenge. I used to live in a gated apartment complex that was built on a hill. I had to walk up 0.3 kilometers up to my block and then up 5 floors as the apartment blocks had no elevators. Parking was limited and the only way to get them was to apply for them 1 year in advance and then paying a lump sum full year for a parking permit and spot at the very beginning of the calendar year. So, for a first year living there, I had to park my car at the side of the public road outside of the complex gate, and then walk all the way up, often carrying my guitars and music equipment along as I wouldn't keep them in the car overnight. My story began almost immediately after moving in when I used the visitor's pass to drive up and unload some bulky furniture. The pass allowed me to a limited parking space, which was thankfully near my apartment. However, as I was done unloading and was leaving, I found my car boxed in by another vehicle that had parked perpendicularly in front of mine. I couldn't leave as no contact info was left, and there were cars on either side of me. I was in a legitimate visitor's parking spot with a valid pass, and I was frustrated as I didn't know why I was boxed in. It didn't help that I had an important appointment to go after and time was running out. Reporting the issue to the security post downhill would also mean me having to walk all the way back uphill. So I did what a frustrated driver would do and blasted my horn for a good 5 minutes. Nobody appeared for some time and I was just about to start the walk down when a lady appeared and started scolding me for taking her parking spot. I didn't say anything as I was confused, and she just kept yelling and accusing me of inconveniencing her. I tried telling her that I was parked in a visitor's spot, but she just kept going on. In the end, she ordered me to move my car and never park there again. She got into her car and moved away for me to get out. I was intimidated by her so I didn't retaliate, but I knew what I wanted to do over the next few days. Apparently, she had illegally duplicated her pass, which was just a car sticker, by photocopying it and used it for her 2 cars, one legal spot, and the fake in the visitor's spot. Within a few hours, I found out which block she lived, the spot she legitimately rents, and which car she used. By the end of that week, I submitted my parking application and waited out the whole year. Come January 2nd, I was the first in line in the management building and paid the full year's rental for my parking spot. The parking spot I chose? That bitch's parking spot. I was issued the parking permit on the spot. I next submitted an officialish complaint of the woman's parking scam, with full photos of the lady's cars, the fake sticker, and her apartment unit number. Management apparently knew who she was. Best part, she walked into the office to pay for her parking spot as I was leaving. I merely smiled at her in passing. I repeated my actions again and used that parking spot for 2 full years before moving out. As for the lady, she got a crap parking spot further away downhill. Makes me smile to this day. Bartender's petty revenge on a queue jumper. Preface: this story takes place in the UK, where queuing is very important and we take it seriously. The drinking age is 18, but it's not relevant. This isn't technically my petty revenge, but I thought it'd be worth sharing nonetheless. I love this sub. DLDR at bottom. SFW. A few years ago I was going to see a few friends for a drink. We'd arranged to meet in a local pub, but some of them said they'd get there a little early to watch the football. As a few of us weren't really into football, we said we'd meet them later on. Later on, I got to the pub and went to get a drink. It wasn't overly busy, but there was only one bartender, so there was a bit of a delay at the bar. Found a spot at the bar and waited my turn. There were a couple of guys waiting to my right, and a bit of a gap to my left, to another group who had drinks in hand and weren't ordering. As the bartender walked in front of me, he asked who was next. I nodded vaguely to my right and off he went to serve the other guys. A few minutes later, a girl probably barely old enough to drink stood next to me. You know that feeling when you instantly know someone's going to be rude? I got that feeling straight away. She stood at the bar, arm outstretched, card in hand, not even bothering to look over to anybody else stood at the bar. When the bartender then asked these guys who was next, she shouted across, "Yeah, 2 passion fruit martinis and a pina colada. Remember I said she didn't bother to look at any of us? Well, that was probably a good decision as I turned to look at the other guys and they were all staring daggers at her. The bartender took her order and began mixing the drinks. Whilst doing so, he looked over at these guys and shot a subtle wink at them. The bartender finished making the drinks and put them on the bar, out of reach of the young lady. He went to the terminal, pressed a few buttons, and said okay, that'll be £186 and 14 pence. The girl said I wait, what? Quick as a flash, the bartender replied there was a round going, the last order was paying the bills. Are you not with these guys? The girl replied, oh, no, I'm just paying for these drinks, thanks. The bartender's reply was very dry. So, you weren't next in line then? He then turned to the other guy stood next to me. Who was next? The queue resumed as intended. When the guy standing next to me got served, he pointed at me and said this girl's next. At no point in these exchanges did any of the orders come anywhere near the value of the round. I got my drinks, I remember it was under £5 for 2 ciders, and paid. Quietly said nicely done to the bartender as I did, to which he gave me a knowing smile. I headed back to our table and shared what had happened with my friends. Whilst doing so, some of the guys at the bar looked over to see us staring in their general direction. To my surprise, a few of them waved, with some of my friends waving back. One of my friends explained, oh, we were standing at the bar earlier watching the footy with those guys. They're all our team's fans too. Bartender's a fan too. He's sound. The girl was stood there for another 10 minutes waiting to pay for her drinks. She spent the time studying a menu, assumedly not wanting to look at anybody else at the bar. TLDR girl cuts in line at a pub. Bartender pretends there's a round going on and then ignores her for 10 minutes. Extravaganza is 4 years of good parking. This situation was just desperation at first, but it sure felt like revenge by the end. TL Doctor, my school made it really expensive and difficult for me to register for campus parking. Turns out that when pushed to its limits, their predatory system broke down on itself. There was no real penalty for just opting out altogether and I ended up parking wherever I wanted for my entire time as a student. Once upon a time I was a sophomore, living in an awful college-owned apartment building on the edge of campus. This was a private school and most of my classmates were wealthy, but I was not. I was working 3 jobs and taking full-time classes. I managed to buy a car over the summer, but right before the semester started it broke down. I had no money for the repairs, but I did know a local mechanic who kind of took pity on me and let me keep the car in his lot while I scraped together enough money so at least I didn't have to pay to park or store it. It took me until early November to get the money together, so most of the semester. When the car was finally repaired, I went to the public safety office at school and asked about registering my car so I could get a spot in my building's lot and a permit to park on campus. I expected this to be straightforward. Unfortunately, this was instead the beginning of a gigantic mess. The guy at the desk said he couldn't give me a spot in my own lot because it was full, but he could give me one in the lot for an off-campus complex that's like a 30-minute walk from my apartment, in the opposite direction of all my classes. I said thanks but no thanks, made a mental note to figure out my own parking solution closer to home, and moved on to the next thing, a permit to park on campus for classes. But this was a non-starter. Without a residential parking spot, I could only register to park in the commuter lots on campus. The commuter permit was like 5x as expensive as the residential ones, I guess because the lots were bigger and closer to buildings. So while this guy clearly thought he was doing me a favor by offering a residential student a commuter permit, there was just no way I could afford it. In desperation, I was like, okay, give me the off-campus spot 30 minutes away, so I can at least get a residential campus permit for classes. We start down that path and he quotes me the cost. It's well over twice what I expected. I'm like, WTF? Turns out, because it was so late in the semester, and he knew cars had to be registered for the next semester, too, paid up front. Also, I had to pay the permit fees. For the entire fall semester nothing was prorated. And of course, registering a car late had a fee attached to it that grew for each week of the semester that had already passed, as a penalty for supposedly parking without a permit prior to registering. This could only be waived if you could prove that you just bought the car, which of course I hadn't. On top of all that, registering a parking spot for a building you didn't live in also had a fee attached to it. And last but not least, in order to put myself on a waiting list to possibly get a spot in my own lot for the spring semester, there was yet another fee. At this point, I'm beaten down by the impossible, exorbitant, expensive maze of nonsense. I just hand the blank paperwork back to the guy and walk out in a daze, almost in tears. I'm already late for class, so I'm like, screw this. I drive to the building and park right in front of the door in a commuter lot. I assume I'll eat the cost of a ticket. At this moment I don't care, but nothing happens. Still feeling tired and defeated by life, I drive to my apartment building after class and park in a guest spot. Again the next morning, no ticket, no nothing. So, I decide to basically just ride this out, buying myself time to work out a better solution. About a week later, I got my first campus parking ticket. Having never had a car on campus until recently, I'd also never seen these tickets before. Right at the top in bold letters, students, staff, and faculty return payment for this ticket to XYZ office. If you are a guest, please ignore this ticket and enjoy your visit. I had a sudden thought, no one knew this car was mine. I had never registered it with the school, so it wasn't in their system. Maybe I could get by pretending this car belonged to a guest for the rest of the semester. It was only a couple weeks. In the final days of the fall semester, I learned that after 5 unpaid tickets to the same car, they run something to figure out who the owner is. Busted. I got a letter in my campus mailbox reprimanding me for having unpaid tickets. I was kicking myself, assuming I'd stupidly caused additional expensive grief, deeply regretting the dumb things I did because I was broke. However, pushing through the panic, I read to the end. Interesting. This was clearly a form letter, which assumed the student car in question was actually registered on campus. Turns out the penalty for having 5 tickets is that those tickets convert into a 2-week permit suspension. Or, you can pay a fine to end the suspension sooner. So, 5 tickets automatically convert into a suspension of a permit I don't have anyway. If I park a car while suspended, I get a ticket. So what this letter is telling me is that I'm essentially just in the same situation I was already in regardless. I'll be ticketed if I park in campus, except that also, I no longer owe the school money for these tickets. I just need to serve out this suspension of my non-existent permit. I accept their terms. A couple weeks later, I'm getting ready for spring semester, still basically broke, but I scrabbled together enough for the parking spot and the permit. I go down to public safety to register my car like a good citizen. However, I learn that because my registration was suspended last semester, I'm now at the end of the list for a spot in my lot, so there's no way I'm getting one. Also, this is now the point where the unpaid tickets do actually have to be paid as a fee, which has to be cleared to activate my registration. If I can't pay that by the start of the semester, I'll also start incurring the other weekly fee for registering late. I'm basically going through round 2 of the same terrible runaround from last time. I feel like I'm losing my mind, and I'm still traumatized from the first experience. Everyone else in that office was just waltzing in with their parents, talking for 2 seconds and swiping a credit card, while I'm over here on my own feeling poor and humiliated and alone in the world. I can just barely afford this registration to begin with, and these fees put it totally out of reach. So once again, I walk out without it, super pissed about how expensive and annoying they're making this. I realize these fees are just going to continue snowballing and I'm not going to be able to register my car this semester, either. I accept my lot in life. So begins the cycle, which continued for the rest of my college career, of me not registering my car and just parking wherever the hell I want. Eventually I rack up 5 tickets. I get the form letter. The tickets are converted to a fee applied to the cost of my next semester's registration, and my non-existent parking permit gets suspended. After 3 suspensions, they suspend my permit for the rest of the semester. Strangely and fortunately for me, as long as I never register my car, it seems that I never have to pay the tickets or the fees they turn into. Towards the end of the fall semester of my senior year, shortly after my imaginary permit was given its 3rd semester-long suspension, I received a new letter. This one says I'm prohibited from registering a car on campus the following semester because I have too many suspensions. So as usual, I don't, and I continue parking wherever whenever. About 3 weeks before graduation, I got a final letter. This one delivered on my car, with a ticket. It is not a form letter. It has "please just stop" handwritten on the outside of the envelope. It says I'm banned from ever registering a car on campus, in any future semesters, because of an egregious number of parking violations. I laugh and then graduate and live happily ever after. Never ever paid a cent. BF cheated me and now I'm living my best life. This sub became one of my favorites lately. So now I want to share my personal experience. I 28M at the time had a BF 28M of 8 years, where I practically did almost everything for cooked, took care of housing, paid all the bills, etc. I thought I did gold by him. Throughout the relationship I would do check-ins to see if there's any issues we may need to work on, and he never said anything was wrong. So I assumed we're working very well, to the point of talking of marriage and future planning a wedding, future family. So on our 8th year we finally moved in together. And one day, he left his phone on the counter. His phone is shit and the battery dies quickly, so I thought it'd be nice to charge his phone for him. When I tapped his phone to see how low his battery was, He had Grindr app open, so I went through it and saw all the guys he's been messaging and been hooking up with. When I confronted him, he admitted it's been going on for the past 3 years. This destroyed me, and of course we ended things. Fast forward about 1.5 years later, I met someone amazing. My ex always talked about wanting to go to Coachella, so my new BF and I went one year. It was his idea. I saw every single one of his favorite artists there who he never seen before live, front and center. I made sure I took as many pictures and videos of them and uploaded them onto my Instagram, which I'm sure he sometimes creeps on. I left my profile on public for this exact reason. A few days after I uploaded, I checked and saw that he blocked me. No words were exchanged. I knew I won. Fast forward to today, just came back from my third Coachella and having an absolutely amazing new happy life. Bonus, my BF is from Hawaii and now I have a free place to stay anytime I visit. Never been before him, and now I've gone. There 3x already. Success is the best revenge. Added 1. I didn't expect to get this many reactions. Honestly expected maybe only 20 likes or whatever, but a minority of you are assuming a lot from someone you don't know. But that's your problem. Yes, of course I'm still hurt. Being cheated on from a 8-year relationship isn't something you just forget and move on from easily. I'm very happy with my new partner and enjoy building new memories. I thought the point of this was just to be petty, smiley face. It's worrying. Some of you are defending my ex instead. You guys must be okay with cheating. Not responding to any more comments. Assume what you want. Edit 2. I'll answer questions about this year's Coachella. Lol. Big Mac toilet revenge. Back in the day I worked at McDonald's roughly 2012. I was working in the kitchen and on the front desk for minimum wage, and a job came up working in the lobby for a higher rate of pay. This job was widely considered to be less stressful, so naturally, I wanted to change roles for more money and less stress. The manager's sister applied and got the job over me, so I was bitter about this. Part of the role of people working on the lobby is to clean the toilets. One day I was working after a very heavy drinking session the night before, and could feel my beard brewing deep inside, yearning to be released. For those of you who don't understand this terminology, it means I needed a gargantuan shit. Anyway, I'm on my lunch break in the staff room when the girl who got the job over me came in complaining that the disabled customer's toilet had been blocked by someone, and she refused to unblock it. After being derided by other staff members for making a scene about performing a crucial element of her job, she threw a tantrum and left the staff room to go outside before cleaning the toilet. This provided me with a small but appealing window of opportunity, which I seized. I proceeded to go in the disabled toilet and unleash the beard on top of the existing blockage. I refer to this as big micking. No regrets. Body shamer. I went to a salon to accompany my sister. Then, a customer arrived unannounced. This salon operates by schedule since it's always crowded. And there she was, making demands even though she knew she wasn't scheduled for today. While waiting for her turn, she body shamed one of the workers, who I think she knew. "Why are you so fat? Are you thriving on problems?" The worker didn't react, but it was evident on her face that she was offended. Then, when it was the customer's turn, the worker, who was body shamed, was the one to assist her. It seemed like she took out her anger through the customer's ingrown removal. The customer was in constant pain because the worker did not make it easy for her. Ha ha ha. The customer said, "Isn't your cut too deep? It hurts so much." The worker responded, "No ma'am, it's just that your ingrown is too deep." It was just so satisfying to see that there was a bit of revenge. I think it was deserved. Boyfriend 22M couldn't stop liking half-naked pictures of other women, so I 21F posted one of myself. Alright, my 22M boyfriend has started following a lot of Instagram women. Not regular ones, I don't mind those, but particularly the ones in lingerie, and with their ass out. Even was watching thereof. I 21F told him it made me uncomfortable and to stop, but his response was, "It's just Instagram. You're doing too much, it's not that serious," and he kept doing it. Well, I posted some pictures of me in a G-string bikini, ass out and all. He saw it and started freaking out, slamming doors and yelling. He was like, you don't respect yourself. Girls who do that are hoes. That's embarrassing. I don't want my GF doing that, bro, that's weird." And he is mad, like really mad. He told me to take it down and I said, "No, isn't this what you like to see?" And his response again was, "You're in a relationship. Why would you do that?" And I said, "I'm only posting what you like." After I said that, he started ignoring me. It's been hours and honestly, I don't feel bad at all. For months I was uncomfortable and asked him to stop and he couldn't, so yay. Now he's a victim of a crime he participates in. Wow. Thanks for the replies. I was not expecting this to blow up. For context, I do want to leave, guys, but it's super hard. I know that I lack self-love and respect. I have realized that I am following in my mom's footsteps and I should change. I can't wait to update you guys when I have officially left. Sorry for the disappointment, guys. Came back for memories. Found bounty on old League of Legends account. X200B first. Shout out to the EA account dude you liar from a few hours ago that posted here. His story bring me back a kinda similar one of mine. X200B TLDR at the end. X200B Part 1. X200B Part 1 Road to Old Memories. A bit of context first. I played League of Legends back then in the first years of the game existence. I don't remember how much time, but I was quite involved as a teenager. I played with my friends and even bought, for like $50 of skins with pocket money. But like some people back then, my temperament was burning ablaze while playing this game and I decided to put an end to it as it affected my social relationships. I forgot about the game for years, and it was nice. X200B. Then a new FPS game came out, Valorant, and a bunch of my friends decided after some time to try it. I was reluctant as it wasn't really my favorite kind of game, but I joined them and created a new account. I played for a few days, and realized something. It's made by Riot, and isn't the company from League of Legends? I remembered my young self playing, and wanted to check if my old account was still up somewhere. X200B. As I tried to log in on the new Riot website, I realized that not only the password was wrong, but my old email wasn't linked to an account. An eyebrow raised later, I decided to send a message to the support, just for the sake of it. I had only one old email when I was a teenager, and I knew that all those hours spent on the games with my friends were not a dream. The form I was filling for a recovery needed a proof that the account was mine, so I dug into my old email address inbox and found a proof of payment for League of Legends skins, with details that, with my original email address, I had what I needed. So I sent the form to Riot and waited for 1-2 days. X200B. With the support help, I successfully connected to my old account on the League of Legends launcher, and I wasn't ready for what I saw. X200B Part 2 Silver Ranked Alibaba. X200B. I didn't know the new LOL interface, so I took a few seconds to realize that not only I didn't recognize my username and friends that suddenly had German-like names, but the profile overall was customized in a girly fashion. Looks like someone took a good care of my old profile while was out there living something else. I took a minute to check the settings, and tried to change the password and such, but to no avail, as there was a 2FA link to something else, probably a cell phone. So I did nothing and contact the support again, telling them what was happening, and that I wanted full control of my account, which has been done not so long after that. After I was sure the password was changed, I took some time to look inside the profile itself. Personal informations, ranking low silver, game's overwhelming number of defeats, and the number of heroes available now. I thought all the characters were free to play now, as I didn't saw any of them gray in the big list, and realized the situation when I saw the kilometer-long list of skins unlocked on the profile. There was so much of them, and I didn't even understood the system that showed the rarity of any of them. I took some time to check them, and found the first ones that I bought as a kid. Memories came back, but were quickly thrown away by another thought. How much worth were all those skins combined? I took some time to see the average price of different skins' rarity, and added them up. X200B. The total worth of skins went well over €700. I was both stunned and laughing. As I proceeded to clean the friend list, I thought about something. I'm sure the person that took well care of my account would be glad to know that her watch duty was over, isn't it? I then sent copy-pasted message to a few of people in the friend list, saying that I wasn't the person they knew with that name, and that account being mine. I took it back. Better warn that person if you know her. I didn't had to wait for long. X200B Part 3 Deutschtown Girl. X200B. After a few hours, someone contacted me in that friend list. It was the previous owner of my account. The conversation was a bit messy, as it started in German, a language I don't speak. It seemed like it was a young German girl, but all I remember was that she was very angry, and full of herself, telling me this account was hers, and that I was a disgusting hacker, stealing her. After saying that I had this account when I was young, she came back telling me that this was her, that she registered herself. Well, my presence here says otherwise. I told her that I had old and detailed proof that it was mine, and she changed her story by saying the account was owned by a friend of her that gave it as a gift. I don't remember all the things she said about my physical integrity and sexuality, but she insisted right after that I would get kicked as soon as she contacted the support. Good luck was the conclusion in short. Spoiler, she didn't succeed, as I had the oldest proof of ownership. X200B Part 4 Double Tap. X200B. Later that day, I decided to try to connect to Valorant with my old Riot account I just restored. And it worked. Oh boy, not only she was deep in LoL, but in Valorant too. And by deep, I mean deep in money. Looks like she threw more hundreds of bucks into that game. Legendary skins there in there. X200B. She was both super active on LoL and Valorant, And there I was, with more skin and unlocks that I would even want on a game admittedly like X200B. I was grinning again. And after playing for a few days with friends too, to which I gave my weapons with skins for them to try, I uninstalled it. And League of Legends too. No way I'm going back on this game, even with that much money spent on it. Good riddance. X200B and resume. Don't put your money on account you didn't create it yourself. X200B. I don't know if her friend was the hacker, the seller, or the buyer of stolen accounts, but looks like he probably wanted to get in her pants back then. X200B TLDR got my old Riot Games hacked account back. Both League of Legends and Valorant filled with expensive skins and unlocks paid by the person that used it for years. X200B. Caught neighbor siphoning gas out of my car. Woke up one morning to find my gas tank empty. Turns out, someone had siphoned the gas out of my car overnight. Checked my security cameras from overnight footage and caught the person doing it. It was a neighbor, a couple, that lived nearby. They tried to park their car a bit away from my house, but we still saw their exact car parked on our Ring camera, as well as them walking over to the car. We couldn't see them in the act of siphoning the gas. At first I was extremely angry and wanted to go confront them, but my husband calmed me down and told me it would be fine, and he would take care of it. The couple was pretty particular about their lawn, always mowing it, trimming the edges, you name it. So, my husband, knowing I'm furious from what they did, came up with the idea of putting grass seeds all over their lawn. Nothing too crazy, just enough to mess with their peace of mind. Watching as their grass grew taller and taller and they couldn't keep up with it? Priceless. He even got some in their driveway, so the cracks in their driveway started growing with grass. It was well worth it in my books. Changed numbers to avoid debt collectors? Let me help you with that. I had my phone number stolen from me years ago. Someone convinced Bell they were me and had my number transferred to a new SIM card. I managed to get it back, but decided a number provider change was the best way to protect myself. It started with the usual texts looking for Edward. I am a woman. When the calls from debt collectors came in, it was quickly obvious I was not him, but they wanted me to get him to call them back. One night Edward texts me. He's been locked out of his PlayStation account and needs me to text him the code so he can update his phone number with PlayStation. Sure buddy, here's your PlayStation code. Is this your new number? For every text or call I received for Edward after that, I offered his new number. Within a couple of months, the calls drastically went down. He hasn't contacted me since, so I assume he's been busy dodging bill collectors, cheaters, ghosters. I've been listening to lots of revenge stories lately. They reminded me of someone who once upset me. My kid was being tested for autism. I was very worried. He downplayed it a lot, wasn't at all supportive or compassionate. It was just a guy I was potentially seeing if a relationship was worth trying. Obviously it wasn't. So, randomly, I remember that he upset me and I used the anonymous STD notification websites to basically tell him you may have been exposed to an STD. Please get tested. I have also done this to ghosters and cheaters. I wait like 2 weeks to a month after the occurrence so they don't realize it's me. All in all, worst case scenario they get tested and find out it is true. Best case, they stress until appointment time and get a clean bill of health. I always chuckle to myself, though, don't make people stress out if you're not ready to be stressing yourself. Corporate treats us like crap, so I'm treat customers nice at their expense. I'm a cashier for a local grocery chain. Our corporate leaders are so penny pinching they monitor the store's income live, and if we undershoot our projected income goal, they'll tell a cashier to go home early to save money. This is on top of our hours being cut. Of course, they have enough hours to hire new staff for the same positions at lower wages. My petty form of revenge is simple. As a cashier, we have a margin of error we can be off by each day before we get a write-up. $2. Whenever I have to give change, if it's 1 or 2 cents off from a 5-cent mark, 20, 25, 30 etc., I just round up. I'm always minus about 50 cents or so each day at most, but that adds up over time. That's just for a part-time shift. Customers are never shortchanged. And before you say I'm contributing to the wage problem, I'll point out my boss rides in a chauffeured Hummer limo wherever he goes. The regional manager also enjoys trying to fire senior staff. I don't feel too bad about being off a few cents a day. Cost my real estate agent $1. I was renting a house with Pool Australia. In Oz RA have a reputation for being wankers. Well deserved TBH, they inspect every 3 months and even for them they were picky. It turns out a neighbor told us a relative of the RA owned it. Finally we bought our own place. The lease was 12 months and said we had to pay a break fee of 6 weeks if the landlord wouldn't agree to waive it. I approached the RA and asked if I gave them 3 months notice and they They rented it. Would they forego the 6 weeks as they would not be losing any rent? No was the instant answer. Okay, I thought not a lot I can do. A couple of days later I look out my window and see a big "To Let" sign in the lawn. I'm like, WTF. I went out, pulled the sign up and dumped it out the front. Called the RA. Yes, you're leaving in 3 months, so I'm entitled to do that, but of course as they wouldn't play nice I replied, no, I'm not leaving, we changed our minds, I hadn't given notice, etc. A few days later an unhappy chap in a truck collected his sign. That's the end of that, I thought. But no. Several days later I got a mail telling me that there's an open house Saturday, for the non-Australians. When you give notice they have the right to show tenants round the house whilst you're still living there. I called again. Yes, we're having one. It's in the contract. Yes, but I have 3 months left on my lease and I'm not leaving. So no, there will be no open house until then. 2 days later I receive a bill for $250 for cancelled advertising. This time my sunny disposition is wearing thin. I mailed the office back saying that they are now harassing a tenant with a lawful lease. If they didn't stop I would be reporting them to every agency I can think of. I get a mail back saying this invoice has been cancelled. Imagine my utter pleasure when on the day that I had originally told them we were leaving I went into the office and broke my lease. I thought her head might explode. The further kicker, that house was empty pre-COVID for a good 3 months after we left. So because they were greedy and wanted my 6 weeks, they lost 6 weeks rent. County forced me to give them 15 of my property along the street. I've lived at this place for 20 years and decided it was time to build a new home. Had the plans drawn up and trotted down to the planning department to get the building permit. When they were approved I returned to pay the plan check fees. Then I was informed that the county planned to widen the road in front of the house as part of a plan to extend the road to a main artery to the north. They wanted me to give them 15 along the 250 frontage of my property before they would issue the permit. They knew they had me over a barrel, so I agreed. But wait, there's more I had to pay. The fees to make the transfer to the county. I left with my approved plans and 15 by 250 less property and clearly pissed. A year passed, the house got built and we moved in. But I was still pissed, so I came up with the get even plan. The area is relatively flat, and drainage is needed to drain excess water on the rare occasions that we get above average rainfall. There's a 125 open drainage ditch along the road that feeds into 125 of buried drainage pipe. Basically the whole 250 frontage. I contacted the county and told them that their drainage ditch was clogged with debris and needed to be cleaned out before the rainy season. Ty agreed to send a crew. Then I told them that their drainage pipe was also clogged and needed to be cleaned out. Again, they said they'd take care of it. To their credit, the county road crew showed up with backhoe, dump truck and the crew. The ditch was pretty straightforward and soon was cleaned up. But the foreman took one look at the pipe and said it was too far gone and would have to be replaced. Gee, owning property can be a bitch. So they dug it all up, including 2 driveways, installed 125 of 18 corrugated drain pipe, and replaced 2 driveways. I thanked them for being good neighbors, taking good care of their property. The whole project lasted a week, so the cost was not insignificant. Another year goes by and I get a letter from the county. They've changed their mind and won't be extending the road after all and want to give me my property back. Of course, I would have to pay all of the fees again. Oh well, I did get a new drain line and newly paved driveways out of the deal. Edit. Wow, that sure blew up. I've replied to a few posters with more of the backstory. That's about as far as I'll go. Most of the opinions are just that, opinions. I'm the only one that has the actual documentation, my Pearl Harbor file, in case I proceeded with a lawsuit. This has certainly been entertaining. Flame on Redditors. Coworker betrayed me and helped get me fired. My coworker was pretending to be my ally and confidant to my face when in reality, she was extracting information from me and fueling the fire with our short small PP boss dude. I was always extremely supportive of her and even bought her groceries and flowers when she had surgery and called just to make her feel better. The day I was terminated I told her I had a meeting that I was really nervous for and she told me to try not to worry. An hour later small PP and head of R appear on my call and terminate me. Backstabbing bitch then takes away all my access and blocks me from all accounts. She never said a word to me again. One night I'm really angry about her betrayal and can't sleep. Typical female in the workplace threatened by another female, so throws the other under the bus, and I decide it's time to do something. I know she's a hardcore liberal, like refused to go to a state given said state's policies. I had her address from sending her groceries and birthday gifts. I signed her up as an elite member of Trump's fan club and as a volunteer for the NRA. When signing up for the NRA you can make a statement to have it listed on their website. The NRA website proudly displays, "I love God, guns, my country and Trump." Signed backstabbing bitch, first and last name. And now I can sleep better at night. Don't be a douche. Douche. This happened 20 years ago and it still makes me smile. I was swimming laps in an empty Olympic-sized swimming pool. 3 teenagers came in and started diving and bombing in the dedicated lap lane. The rest of the pool was empty. Slowly the boys were getting bolder. One jumped just in front of me, so I plowed straight through him, but it was starting to piss me off. Fortunately at this point a lifeguard came and told them to move, but they spent the next 15-20 minutes being pricks. When I finished my swim I went to the changing room and they had not bothered to lock up their shit, so I hid their running shoes all over the place. The first couple would have been easier to find, but the rage was real, so the last 2 might have really taken them on a game of hide and seek. Made me feel better. Little shits. Don't put toddlers on horses. About 5-ish years ago, I was watching my daughter 14 now same. One in my evil daughter stories feed our distant neighbor's horses carrots. She's been doing it since she could walk. They love her. She's never once been nipped, while meanwhile I've been flat out bitten multiple times when I'm just literally standing there or holding her. That being said, on this occasion, our neighbor Betty was outside and her nephew 2 or 3 was on a horse all by himself. Instantly the dad in me kicked in. And I told her that wasn't a great idea. I told her that horses are awesome, but that they're also sometimes unpredictable and easily spooked, and that even the best adult rider could get hurt. She got mad as hell, and berated me for 5 minutes, repeatedly reminding me and anyone who wasn't deaf and within 10 miles that she was raised with horses blah blah blah. I let her rant, said she's the expert, and walked home with my kid. A week or so later, my daughter and I are in our local store, and Betty and her nephew show up behind us in line. He's got a cast on his right arm. My daughter immediately does her thing and gives him a hug. I then looked at Betty and gasped. She didn't have a black eye. She had a black, blue, purple half a face. I instantly forgot about the kid, and asked her if one of her horses had kicked her. Her nephew said nope. Mommy whacked at her with her tennis racket cause Aunt B put me on a horse all by myself and I got my arm broken when I fell off. My daughter immediately busts out laughing like a hyena, which got everyone laughing. Lady a few spots behind us literally dropped her basket. She was laughing so hard. Even Betty was cracking up. Anyway, today was my daughter's first riding lesson with Betty, her Christmas gift, and figured I'd share the story. I know it's not a petty revenge story, but I wasn't sure in which category it should go in. Thanks to everyone who reads it. Have an awesome Wednesday. 3 things I'll add. 1. The 3-year-old was in an adult saddle with only his hands keeping him on. 2. Big Sis was one of the top tennis players in the state in high school, and she stormed into the brand new urgent care center with her favorite racket. It's pretty much local legend. Lady asked if she could help her. Nope. But my sister sure as SH gonna need some in about 10 seconds. Then whack it a few seconds later. 3. She of course felt horrible about it later, but she still nailed that racket to the fence as a reminder. Seeing that broken racket had my daughter and I laughing harder than we did at the store. Don't try to steal from where I am working. This occurred when I was a timid 18-year-old, going to college and working PT at a large chain store. My job included some cashier type work, selling ticketronics, listening to complaints, that sort of thing. There was a man who frequently visited the store and tried to rile up cashiers whom he asked to make change. He was one of those con artist types. Anyhow, after handing over a $20, asking for $2.10s, he would change his mind and want $1s, then $5s and $1s. He tried it on a lot of cashiers who ended up reconciling the till and finding out they were short. His favorite game was to make the cashiers cry when he shouted to everyone that he had been cheated out of the right change. This I saw in person in his antics a few times. He never went to a male cashier, always the young females. He came in on a very busy Saturday, just before Christmas, and wanted change for a $50. I knew what he was up to, so purposely put all of my $50s under the till box after he had handed it to me. I gave him change for a $20. Just at that time the head of security was watching him from not too far away. He had seen him on camera entering the store. This con guy lost his SH and started screaming that I had cheated him. Of course, I immediately called security. Viola, security showed up, as he was only feet away. While this guy was cussing up a storm about his $50, I proudly showed my till with $50s in it. Mr. Con Guy was escorted out and given a no trespass paper. Never saw him again. The $50 went to security when it was somehow found on the floor of the area where we were working. I heard later it was donated to a women's shelter. Dressed overly casual at a designer store so that the rude sales rep wouldn't get commission. I don't typically buy a lot of designer clothing, but when I do go shopping, I dress pretty casually. Last week I was strolling through the mall and there was designer backpack on display that caught my attention. I went inside the store wearing a hoodie and ripped jeans and went to inquire about the price of the backpack. I waited around for 10 minutes for someone to help me until I decided to go up to one of the sales representatives myself. She told me to wait because she was helping another customer, so I sat down and waited. I saw her in the corner of the store just standing, not doing anything. I decided to wait another 5 minutes for her to come back, but she never did. I walked back up to her and told her I wanted to inquire about the backpack. I asked her if she could bring one from the back room so I could take a closer look at it. She told me that she wouldn't be able to do that unless I was planning on purchasing the item. She seemed annoyed with my request. Before I could say anything else, she quickly walked away to help another customer. I'm quite young, 25F, and I could tell she didn't think I was serious about purchasing it and didn't want to waste her time. I would have actually purchased it then and there if she hadn't been so dismissive. A few days later, I went back into the store. This time I made sure to dress even more casually than before. I walked in with a pair of sweatpants, running shoes, a tank top and zip up. The same lady was working that day and turned her back to me as soon as I walked in. I went up to one of the other sales representatives. This guy was younger, smiling and seemed eager to help, and I told him I wanted to purchase the backpack and he gladly went inside and got for me. He even asked if I'd like to take a look at it before buying. I thanked him and he checked me out. The store manager was also by the cashier and I let him know that I came in last week and that the lady wouldn't let me see the product before purchasing it. He was upset to hear this and told me this wasn't the first time he had received a complaint about her. The item was a few grand and all the commission went towards the junior. He was so kind and grateful. She avoided eye contact with me after she got told off by her manager and I smiled at her as I walked out of the store. Don't judge a book by its cover. Drink all your wage and not give my mom any problem fixed. TLDR: drink all your wage then abuse your wife and son. Find out your wallet has some cash shrinkage going on. So some background. This happened when I was 15 during the 1980s and the months before I had to leave home due to my abusive alcoholic father's violence. My father would on every payday drink all his wage, sometimes not coming home for days until he was broke. The not coming home part was a mixed blessing. On one hand, my mom and I didn't have to deal with his abuse. On the other hand, I was always waiting for his footfall on the veranda, thus heralding his return home, and then it would start. Consequently, we were always struggling financially with mom's wage. As a teacher barely covering the mortgage and living costs, I was expected to do very well at school, so I couldn't get an after-school job. Consequently, I never had money to buy the one thing that kept me sane: hardcore punk music. I would play music while I studied and to channel all that angst and rage. The music was sourced from mixtapes my mates would make for me. I have to say, even to this day, music like the Dead Kennedys gets me through tough times. I digress. So now to the petty revenge. The revenge started when one day I noticed my dad had come home dead drunk and placed his wallet and cash on top of a wall unit in the lounge room before he went to bed. I could see a loose $20s and even a $50 lobsters and a pineapple, Australian slang since the currency is colored and easily identified. That's when my plan started to form in my mind. Come the following payday, my dad did the same thing with his cash, so I kicked my plan into action. That morning before he awoke, I pushed a $20 and a $50 off the top and down the back between the wall unit and wall. I had to be super cautious because if he caught on, I would have coped to hiding. So 1. I left behind some cash, not taking it all. 2. I waited a few days before taking the cash I had hid. This was so that if he came at me, I could plead ignorance. I could go up to the wall unit and point out he must have accidentally knocked the cash behind the unit being so drunk. Lo and behold, a few days later the cash was still there and Dad was none the wiser. My assumption he is too drunk to notice missing cash was correct. I retrieved the cash. I slipped the $50 into Mom's wallet and kept the $20 with the anticipation that I could get some new vinyl. We are talking the late 80s here. How sweet that purchase of new music was. This game went on for a few months before I found him tearing up my room one day. He found nothing as I had my hiding spot. He had nothing on me, but the game was up. Forward a few more months, I leave home due to some pretty extreme violence, resulting in Mom getting legal support to kick him out. I returned home, completed school and went to university. I never had anything to do with him again. Another kind of petty revenge. I still have the cherished vinyl collection, and in my 20s I finally told Mom what I had done. Keeping her uninformed was to protect her at the time. She replied, all those times of finding extra money in my purse puzzled me for ages. Now I know. Eclipse hotel price gouging? Enjoy empty rooms. I posted this as a comment to another post. Several people said to post it standalone. I decided to wait until after, but still, I won't say where because reasons, but I had a hotel booked and then they cancelled my reservation because of a computer error, but now the same rooms were available for like $700, so Me and some friends reserved all their rooms at the higher rate and the cancellation deadline was the day before. I'm sure they got some of them rebooked. But we kept reserving rooms until they had no availability, and then canceled them all around 3:30 p.m. for a 4 p.m. deadline. And they had lots of availability up till midnight the night before, and considering they have been plastered with bad reviews because they have done this to others, I wonder if their business will recover. Giga Chad Dump's boat was on a creek with a bit more than 2k CFS, which is a decent strong flow for this creek. As I came into the takeout of our section, I had a small eddy and asked the guys about to put in if I could take out before they put in. There was no room in this eddy. Massive Chad looking dude says I can wait. I slightly move. Okay, throws his dinky kayak almost on top of mine, goes to jump in and just flips right into the water. Sorry buddy, man shrugging. I tried to explain to them they gotta let us off the water, especially when it's flowing that much. Gonna disturb my sleep. Fine. Hi, I'm Mihai and I live in Europe. I apologize for misspells or errors from advance. I 14M live in a block of flats and I had a pretty rough history with my next door neighbor. I remember when I was younger there was this guy that would always talk in the phone at night and very loudly, many times swearing pretty bad, and for 6 years old me, wasn't nice. 2 years later this guy moves out and a couple move in, and at wad rate. They were really nice and polite and they tried for a kid many times but failed. So they really shown kindness towards me. We would stay at them other times at our place, and it was just nice. But here comes the reason for this story. 1 year ago they moved out because their small bussiness did well and they moved in a bigger city. They put the flat for sale and left. I was sad, but I hoped to get some cool new neighbors like them. I did not. This young lady and her 4-year-old are like demons. I never could imagine such a 4 years old. So let me explain. Soon after they moved in, I heard some nasty arguments between the mom and son, and I never thought I would hear a 4 years old call his mother a bitch. I was in shock for a second, then I realized what kind of people they are. Months go by, and the situation gets worse. At late hours of the night, I hear screaming and swears and I really need my sleep. A very big exam is coming and I need a good grade and they do not make my situation better. So here comes my revenge. My classmates are up to anything that could give them some laughs, so that's what I did. I let them ding-dong their door, hit their door multiple times and they were not happy, but I could care less. And this lady said she would call the police, but she has no evidence I was related. So now every time she bothers me again I do this threatment. But lately she has been more quiet, so I think it worked. It was a bit long, but thanks for reading. Got bullied for years, only to end up more popular than my bully. I was a very cringe, dorky kid. A big reader, into sci-fi fantasy, loved old movies and music. Just generally too enthusiastic about the wrong things. Didn't help that my family was too broke to keep up with trends, and, to top it off, I was an undiagnosed little ADHD weirdo with not great social skills. In early middle school, my longtime best friend decided being friends with me was social suicide. They were very preoccupied with fitting in, so I became a liability in her eyes. Instead of spurning me altogether, she'd let me tag along, but began to bully the hell out of me on a regular basis. Anytime I gushed about my interests, this girl would make a disgusted face, then pointedly look to other kids like okay. Weird for a cheap laugh. Sometimes she'd begin taunting me in front of a whole classroom about not having any friends. I'd angrily insist I had friends, only for her to sneer, name one friend. I'd scan the faces around me including hers, knowing from experience that if I named any of them, they'd yell, you actually thought we were friends?" and laugh in my face. I'd get stood up as a joke, I'd get ditched, I'd get dogpiled at sleepovers. All the classics, and all spearheaded by my former best friend, let's call her FBF. However, I simply did not have the self-esteem to stand up to her or ditch her. I just took it. I thought I deserved it. 3 to 4 years of this. Then we hit high school. One of the girls my former best friend began to hang with had an older brother who was a member of the cool older alt kid clique. So when he allowed us all to tag along with him to a local concert one night, we ended up being introduced to his friends. I remember it clearly. I was trying to sell my FBF on the old Cary Grant film, Arsenic and Old Lace, and just as FBF began to ridicule me, one of the older girls whirled around to exclaim, "OHH, I love that movie." Within 10 minutes of arriving, I shifted from standing with my former friend group to the cool older kid group. Turns out we had a lot in common and it felt incredible finally meeting people who shared my interests. I looked back at FBF and found her seething across the room. She was baffled. Why did the people she wanted to impress prefer someone like me over herself? It turns out cool older alt kids are also cringe dorks. They just happened to pull it off by framing it as being interesting and creative. Within 3 months of starting high school, I barely associated with my former bullies. I was too busy going to shows, playing DD, thrifting, and meeting all sorts of new people at parties. A few times, early on, FBF pressured me into bringing her along to social events with my new friends, but people were always very underwhelmed by her. I'm sure it didn't help that most of them knew her reputation as a mean girl, but then dang, I wonder who told them. This frustrated FBF to no end. Every now and again, I'd hear through the grapevine that FBF was bitching about me to anyone who'd listen. She thinks she's hot shit, but she's not. I have no idea why those people even like her. What do they even see in her? It'd always catch me off guard, like you're this worked up over me just living my life? That's weird. I don't even think about you. Ironically, FBF ended up being something of a forgettable nobody. In high school she wasn't particularly interesting, funny, nice or smart. She started adopting some of the very same interests she'd bullied me for liking and pretended she'd always been into them. Didn't achieve much. I think people could sense it was performative. She was always too busy trying to chase being cool to realize other people value authenticity above all else. It was a pretty nice lesson. Your sense of humor, taste in music, etc. might be considered cringe by one person, but they might make you stand out to another. It's all subjective. At the end of the day, though, being a nasty bully isn't gonna endear you to people. Guy spreads rumors about me and insults me unprovoked, calls me a virgin so I prove him wrong. This guy who I hardly know started spreading rumors about me being sexist towards women about last year. However, I've barely talked to the guy and I've also never been sexist to any of the women that have been a part of my life. I asked them. One day at a party he starts insulting me and calling me a virgin despite me not being one. Lamau. This was around the time his girlfriend broke up with him, so I assume he was just insecure and took it out on me. I met his ex-girlfriend at another party and we hit it off, and a week later we started hooking up. She's told quite a few people about us, and it's definitely made its way to him. Halloween scare. 30 years ago, I was working as a volunteer actor in a charity haunted house. It was a major production in a big city, not just a couple low-budget rooms. My role was to lie face down on the ground in one of the first rooms, acting as if mortally wounded and crawling away from the rest of the tour. Moaning and muttering turned back. Enter some drunk kids, laughing and talking loudly about how lame things were. A couple of them seemed to think I was an animatronic, and this might have been reasonable due to the lighting. However, they took it too far. One of them aimed a pretend kick at my head, missing by a couple inches. I didn't react, keeping in roll as they walked past. When they were at my waist, I rolled over and up into a sitting position right next to them and roared my best garg. Triple take, triple scream, hands and knee up in a defensive posture. Then practically running out the "it's too scary" exit as a group. So satisfying. He cheated on me, so I broke his phone. Last year, I dated a guy. He ended up cheating on me and dumping me for the girl he was cheating on me with. He told me he wasn't sorry, he didn't regret what he did, and he did it because he was using me for when he was bored. I was obviously super hurt and cut him out of my life. My plan was to never seek revenge, but when the opportunity arose, I had to take it. In the beginning of the fall semester, the club he's in at our college had a fundraising event where if you paid $5, you got to try knocking one of the club members into one of those carnival dunk tanks. I walked past the table and noticed my ex was there, but he wasn't the one in the dunk tank. I went up the table and asked how much I had to pay to choose who I dunked. So I handed them a $20 bill, chose my ex to go into the tank, and threw the ball at the target like an MLB pitcher at a World Series game. I hit the target first try, and my ex got dunked into a giant bucket of freezing cold water with all of his clothes on. After he got out, he started freaking out because he forgot to take his phone out of his pocket and it wasn't turning on. He called me a bitch, turned around, and started walking back to his apartment soaking wet. Revenge is a dish best served cold and wet. Help me help you. This is my dad's story, not mine, but it really makes me laugh. My dad used to be a bit of a hothead, but only when provoked. He had a flooring business, and got a job carpeting an entire state building filled with offices people were currently working in, and they knew they'd need to get their stuff out. To help keep them stay organized while they were relocating, my dad brought a ton of boxes and told everyone individually that they could use them to keep their papers organized. He would even help them pack up. One office was occupied by a lawyer, who decided not to pack. My dad walked in. There were papers stacked high everywhere, and all over his desk. Dad explained the boxes, as he did with everyone, and offered to help. The lawyer was arrogant and shitty. He scoffed, and said he didn't care. He wasn't going to move his stuff, said my dad needed to take care of it. My dad said okay, grabbed one side of the desk, and flipped it over completely, stacks of papers flying everywhere. The lawyer looked at him in disbelief. He said he didn't care, right? My dad threw everything messily into the boxes and threw the boxes outside the door. The lawyer couldn't do a damn thing about it, as he had told my dad to just take care of it. I can't imagine what it was like for that guy to have to go through all those papers again. Here's a lesson to always believe your children when they say they're sick. Short but sweet. X200B. I was around 8 or 9 when this happened. My mom worked nights and was asleep. I was in the living room watching cartoons, not feeling too well. At one point I started to feel the need to be sick, so I got up and headed for the bathroom. My mom was awake, and she blocked me from passing, and started scolding me about something or other I can't remember. I told her I was going to be sick. She didn't believe me and kept scolding. I couldn't hold it in anymore. I was sick all over the carpet and her feet. Hotel room lesson with feces and milky condom. This petty revenge story took place in 2008 in Rhodos Island, Greece. I was visiting the island for 8 days for a university vacation event and I was sharing a very small hotel room with 2 friends. One of these friends was a funny guy but also a weirdo who loved saying and doing shocking things and making others uncomfortable every chance he got with complete disregard of social rules and decency. While we shared the tiny room, he would wake up every morning at 7 a.m., which is insane, while being on vacation, and would start moving around furniture, the entire bed and bedside table, making a lot of noise to create space to work out. His workout was just jumping around while huffing and stomping his feet on the floor and turning on the air conditioner and set it to 16 degrees Celsius, which is quite cold for a small room. So naturally every morning the F-ker would wake us up with an insane amount of noise and him huffing and sweating over our heads while we froze. He would also use the bathroom and wouldn't properly clean up afterwards, and he had clogged the shower drain with hair which he refused to remove. We told him to stop because we was ruining our rest, and also got several complaints from other rooms for all the noise he made so early every morning. Of course he was completely unfazed and continued doing his thing. On the 4th day I had enough and decided to take action. One afternoon I entered the bathroom and turned off the water supply and removed the valve so it couldn't be turned on. I flushed the toilet so there would be no water and then used a plastic cup to empty the water from the toilet bowl. Then I proceeded to take a dump, which of course was not submerged in water and there was no way to flush it. I also placed a condom filled halfway with condensed milk on the doorknob from his side. I took the bathroom key and waited. The moment he entered the bathroom I locked him inside and turned off the light. He was trapped in darkness with the smell of fresh crap with no windows. He freaked and started yelling and banging the door while trying to turn the doorknob, only to find out there was something sticky and slimy on it. But he didn't know what it was since there was no light and the door wouldn't open. He was yelling about the horrible stench and the yucky thing that was on his hands, which I told him was jizz. He gagged and screamed to let him out. I told him that he needs to respect others and when asked to stop doing stupid shit politely, he should do it and play nice with his roommates. He threatened to start screaming to draw attention from other rooms and we would be in trouble, to which I responded that even if they hear him he would be the one blamed, since he already had amassed several complaints against him and he had no proof of what I was doing to him. And the most possible outcome would be him being severely reprimanded from the university for his behavior, which reflected badly on its image. In other words, he was effed and there was nothing he could do. I left him in there for nearly 2 hours while scolding him for his behavior through the door and him begging me to let him out. After I opened the door he was completely dejected and sad. From that day onward he stopped his bullshit and was a good boy. TLDR, I trapped a friend in a dark hotel bathroom with steaming crap to teach him a lesson about being a proper roommate. I exposed an affair because it was affecting my sleep. So I'll start with understanding what I did wasn't exactly right, but I regret nothing. TLDR, my upstairs neighbor is having an affair and it's disrupting my sleep. So I found the wife online and messaged her. Problem solved. My upstairs neighbor has been having an affair with a married man for about 4 months now. I wouldn't care, but because it's an affair he comes over at odd hours of the night and they have sex very loudly. I can hear a lot and it wakes me up, prevents me from sleeping. How do I know it's an affair? He's never spent the night and his car has baby car seats in there. Some backstory: I've had issues with my upstairs neighbor prior to this. She would throw parties on Monday nights. She gets home at 2 a.m. from work, pacing her condo and having loud phone conversations. She's 40 years old, throwing parties with 20 years old and having affairs and living like a teenager. I tried to talk to her like a normal person about my concerns, but she doesn't care and I've had to get the association involved to stop the parties. I hate her. So I decided to learn some more about this mystery man. I looked up the license plate, found an address, searched the address and found a name, took the name and did some social media stalking and found the man and his wife's profiles. I made a throwaway account, Message the wife about the affair. I haven't seen him now for a few weeks and I'm sleeping really nicely. Really nicely. Edit. People asking how did you find the address? Website called InfoTracer. I finally put my foot down for my spoiled sister's bad behavior and stood up to my parents. This story is at least a decade old, but it's still one of my most satisfying petty revenge stories. When I then 19M was home for the summer from college, my sister then 17F was reveling in being the only child in the house. My sister is the baby of the family and act like it. We generally get along, but she could occasionally be a spoiled brat. I am the opposite of my sister. For most of my childhood I was a bit of a doormat. Classic middle child, very well behaved and under the radar. I didn't fight back much, did as I was told, and generally behaved. The biggest shake-up I brought to the family was when I came out as gay at 17. No one was really bothered by it and my family is generally pretty supportive. Still, it was a difficult thing to process and I am glad I got to the point I have today. This is relevant to the story. Now, at the time I was a much better and more responsible driver than my sister, and as a condition for staying at home for the summer, rent-free, my parents would occasionally ask me to drive my sister to and from places they didn't want her driving, usually longer distances or on the highway. For the most part I did not mind. I love my sister and we generally get along very well, but like I said, she can occasionally be a real brat and has trouble when things don't go her way. One night my sister had gotten tickets to attend concert with a boy she liked. As my aunt and uncle were in town and my parents wanted to spend the afternoon having a few glasses of wine out on the patio, they asked if I would be okay driving my sister to the concert that evening. I accepted and figured that was that. My sister and cousins decided they wanted to look at some new outfits and asked me to drive with them to the mall. Being the good brother cousin I was, I piled them into my car and took them to the mall. All was well until my sister decided I was getting on her nerves over something and we got into an argument. Wasn't a big deal until my sister, visibly annoyed, rolled her eyes and said you don't have to be such a faggot about it. I saw red. I had been called this word before and have been able to shrug it off, but from my own family, I was not going to take it. I could have yelled, argued more, or even stooped to her level. But it suddenly came over me what I was going to do. It was simple. I was not going to drive her to the concert. I told her as much and she smirked to tell me, yeah, right, like mom and dad are going to be okay with that. Now when we got home I went to my parents, explained what happened, and let them know I would not be driving her to the concert. To my complete lack of surprise they took her side and explained to me they understood I was upset but I would still need to take her to the concert. My sister's smug look was all I needed. No, was all I said. My parents seemed confused and then explained that was not an option. I simply said, you cannot make me. I do not care what you do. I will not drive her. Years of resentment over having to be the good sibling finally spilled out and I simply said no. My parents, a few glasses of wine deep, tried everything. They threatened to ground me, yelled at me, threatened to take my things, got in my face, and I held my ground. I told them I would take any punishment they wanted but no one could force me to drive her. At one point I even looked my father in the eye and said, tell me it's okay for her to call me a faggot. Tell me it's okay for anyone to do that, and my parents didn't know what to do. They were too drunk to drive and it was too late to ask anyone else. My sister refused to apologize, but as we got closer to the time we had to leave I could tell she was starting to panic. The rage on her face was building up and it was the sweetest revenge I could ask for. For once she wasn't going to get her way, and there was nothing she could do about it. Nothing would make me do it. This was the hill I would die on. My sister ended up missing more than half of the show and cried the whole night. It's what she deserved. As for me, my parents never even ended up punishing me. Maybe they were too stunned to do anything, or more likely saw that I was right. But from that point on I had no problem setting boundaries as needed. I could be kind but I wasn't going to be my family's doormat. I got my bully expelled from high school. My first interaction with a bully was in 9th grade. He failed 9th grade and had to repeat it. We were not only in the same class, but we were also put sitting together. The guy bullied me for being gay, overtly skinny, smart, basically anything you can think of. There was also some physical violence, as well as some sexual innuendos. He grabbed my butt a couple times and would rub his genitals to catch my attention. At the time I strongly believed he was gay, and today I have the confirmation. The following year, we both moved on to 10th grade. One afternoon, at the end of chemistry class, the whole class was acting out of control, so the teacher called the principal, who punished us by keeping us in the classroom for 10 minutes, shutting the door and staying outside the room. In an act of rebellion, I hit the door really hard with my palm. The teacher heard it and came back inside to give me something I can translate as a red absence. It's a harsh form of punishment for bad behavior. Worse than this is suspension and expulsion. The next day, the head teacher assigned to our class asked us about what happened. At this point, for whatever surprising reason, most of my classmates had enough with this guy's bullying and didn't seem to like him anymore. So, They all told me to tell the teacher that me and him hit the door together, and they would support me. As a result, the bully also got a red absence. He got heavily upset to the point of calling his father to the school to talk to the principal. I was asked to make a statement in front of his father, and I lied to this father with a straight face. A few months later, the bully got himself in another problem. He was making money piercing ears after school inside school premises. One teacher found him doing this, and they got another red absence. 2 red absences in the same year means expulsion. He got expelled and I was left with one less bully. Edit. Thank you so much for the outpouring of support. I have a few more stories I'll share on this sub in the future. I got my middle school bully held back a grade so I wouldn't have to deal with them in high school. It worked. Edit. I was 13 when this happened. I don't condone my behavior, but I also don't blame 13-year-old me for doing this. So for context, I'm autistic and non-binary but didn't know it back then. I got picked on all the time by various people, but especially this one guy in my gym class. He would harass me in the locker room, call me names, spit on me, trip me, and worse. He was basically the reason I never wanted to go to school. He was also in a class that I was the TA for. Here's where my revenge comes in. About halfway through the year being the TA, I used my knack for memorization and organization to my advantage and became really good at handling grades etc. for the teacher, and he actually gave me full access to the computer input of all grades for all his classes, assignments and tests. This was the late 90s. For context, after being shown the ropes of how to input everything and catching on quickly, I was practically doing all the inputting for this teacher, and upon viewing class lists I noticed my bully's name. So I slightly began adjusting most of the grades for all my bully's assignments, and I kept this up for the last half of the year, all the while getting picked on by him and his friends. He wasn't able to graduate middle school and had to repeat the 8th grade because he was also having problems in other classes. I know this because my friend's little brother also went to that middle school. Don't bully a kid who's clever enough to get you back. I literally never saw that bully again after I left middle school. Good riddance. I don't care what he may have went through, it's honestly not my problem. I shouldn't have been the victim to such horrible treatment just because of who I am, and if nobody else will stand up for me, I will. I interrupted an annoying kid's Roblox session. So, as an electrician, I was working on some PowerPoints at this guy's house. I asked him to switch off TVs, computers etc. for like 5 minutes. He went and told his son, maybe 11, to turn off the TV and his console, and after a bit of back and forth he finally obeyed. But not even a minute later, the kid came up to me all mad, demanding I restore the power ASAP as he was in the midst of playing Roblox. His dad seemed unconcerned about this behavior, so I just told him politely that I need 5 minutes and the power will be back on. Not even 2 entire minutes after, that lil SH came back and pressed for an update, asking me, can't you hurry up a little? Come on, what is taking you so long? I tried to stay polite and told him again that I'll be done soon and he just needs to have a little bit of patience. But honestly, at this point I was already very irritated and annoyed at both the kid and his unconcerned dad. So after I was done, I cleaned up before turning the power back on again, delaying it by another 10-15 minutes. Petty, but totally deserved and worth it. I let my flatmates shit themselves, which ultimately led to their eviction. This was around 15 years ago. I had a flatmate, let's call her Julie, who was always crying poor and never paid bills on time, then announces she's headed to Bali for a week. I said, before you go, are you going to give me the money you owe me for her part of our utility bills? She said when she gets back. I'm livid, so off she goes. On the last day she messages me and tells me she's got Bali belly and had diarrhea all day and worried about the flight home. She also informs me she is broke and could I pay for her taxi home around $100 from the airport, as she's worried about taking public transport back in case her stomach is still upset. I told her I would be working and not home to pay for her taxi. She says fine, she'll ask one of her friends she's on holiday with to give her the money. Then she informs me she didn't take her house keys with her and could I leave them hidden somewhere so she could get into the house when she gets home. I don't reply, but I assume she thinks I will. Anyway, I wasn't really working, so I hid in my bedroom and I could see the front entrance from my bedroom upstairs and peek out the window. I watch her drive up and exit the taxi. She couldn't locate keys, so starts trying all different ways to get in. I had prepared and made sure every access point was locked up. She starts calling my phone, which I ignore. I can hear her swearing and then she's doubled over, and before I know it she's shitting herself. She's in a denim skirt and it's runny. Now I'll be honest, I was not quite expecting her shitting on our doorstep. I was more thinking she'd freak out and have to sit outside all day till I came home, but this was a far more perfect outcome. I only wish I could have filmed it. She is horrified but changes into something from her luggage and hides her soiled clothes and suitcase in a bush in the front yard and takes off down the street. I take that opportunity to leave the house, and on my Way out whilst gagging, I placed her soiled clothes inside her suitcase. A few hours later I finally call her back pretending to be on my lunch break, and she's screaming down the phone blaming me for not leaving out her keys and that she's been sitting outside for hours and begging me to come home to let her in. I said sorry, I have to still finish work and have plans this evening, and she'd have to either call a locksmith or wait till I get home. She said I can taxi over my keys to her, which I refuse. She hangs up and then I treat myself to 2x movies at the cinema and a nice dinner. I get home later that evening and she's broken a window to get in. The next morning I contact the landlord and tell them what she did. As we paid rent individually and they always had issues with her late rent, they said they would look at evicting her as they'd had enough too. She doesn't speak to me at all, and a few weeks later I'm informed via the landlord she's moving out. We never speak again. I'm pretty sure she tells the story as me being a psycho flatmate, which I'm happy to wear that badge proudly. I was a bullied kid and now feels kind of good to see the people who made my HS years hell have a bad life. Well, not sure if this will be removed because I actually didn't take any action on their apparent bad luck today, or because this just sounds like me being an odd but couldn't think of anywhere else to post. I was made fun of because my teeth not being straight, because of my big nose, because someone saw my drunk dad around on weekends and that was joke, because teachers liked me, because I lived really far from school, because I didn't have money to buy much during lunch, or because if my shoes or backpack were still fine I would use them the next school year as well because we were broke. You name it, I had it. Even some people I thought I was being friends with would eventually join whoever was the coolest kid around in making me feel like shit. And I know we were kids, this doesn't mean these people are bad persons still today. I don't know them. But I was a kid too, and I wasn't a fucking bully. I was always the youngest of my class because my country allows people to skip grades, so I graduated HS at 14. I am 26 now. I live in a small city and work for a manufacturing company who is the biggest employer of the region, so naturally people I know end up working there since there's a lot of people. I was recently promoted and now make like 7 times the average salary of my country, own a decent car that's paid in full, about 2, graduate from my master's, am saving to buy a house, have good friends, go on weekend getaways a couple times a year, and am a happy person. The other day at work, a new operator, she was in training, so new employee stopped me to say hi and was one of the people who hurt me. The one thing I remember she used to say was, "Poor Esther, let's all raise funds so we can get her teeth fixed." I remember her thing was saying "poor Esther" in a condescending way and laugh, not my real name XD. She also a couple times stole my backpack and hid it in a bathroom trash can. There's something so insulting on people saying "poor you" because of something you don't even consider a relevant problem in the moment, and it's a problem only because they made it like that about my teeth. She's pregnant, her 3rd pregnancy, started college for a humanities degree that she didn't complete, is single mom of 2 other kids, and has jumped from manufacturing company to manufacturing company after she left college. This is minimum wage in my country, that's like $400 monthly. I have met other people from HS over the years and same case. One of them even went to jail for hitting his wife and kid. I am having a great life and it's not based on other people having a bad one. And this perhaps makes me a bad person, and I know I can fall to or make bad decisions, and maybe in her mind this girl is super happy with her life and bunch of kids and salary. But I know if my decisions ever make me pull the short stick, I won't have people pleased with my bad luck, as I am with ears because I am not a fucking bully and I don't damage people intentionally for fun as these assholes did. Guess the conclusion here is, bad years don't last forever. HS is just a phase, and being the queen bee in HS doesn't mean a successful life. Driving to HS in a cute car or having much money for lunch or being successful in HS doesn't mean that's for life. Just as being the rug everyone steps on doesn't mean you're going to be it forever. I was the weird, solitary girl mocked and bullied at school. Now the bullies see all my stories. I was bullied and isolated at HS and elementary school. I did not have any friends to go out with. I was once friends with one of the popular girls, but she used me as scapegoat and bully others, so I preferred being alone. I am from a rural region in Europe, a little town of maybe 5k people, and everything changed when I moved to university in a big city. It is difficult to make friends even from other schools in the area because everyone knows each other. I had zero confidence. Break times I basically spent them in the school library to not get bullied or pushed, so books were my refuge. I was alone, and also things at home were pretty rough because of my father addiction, so home was not a peaceful place either for some years. I am also only child, so I did not have anyone to play with at home either or have support from. I was kinda nerd girl who always had the almost better grades, and NY interests were not of the popular girls. My childhood was very solitary, and all that situations at home and school led me to even think of dying myself. I barely think of the time because it was very painful. X200B. Fast forward when I turn 18, I wanted to pursue studies that were not available in my region. Honestly, that is true, but also it was of the idea of moving somewhere else. My mother gave me the liberty to do that and I did. It was a bold move. I did not know anyone there other than couple relatives. Moving to a big city was the best choice of my lifetime. I moved to one of the best universities of my country and had good grades. I joined university societies, did volunteering activities and made amazing friendships that still last today. New people, new friends, and I gained confidence and was not the shy, awkward girl with zero friends anymore. Now I work in Brussels, I travel the world and help other people in public speaking. I love what I do and hope my younger self, solitary quiet girl, is proud of myself today. Now, the bullies from school see all my big stories of my traveling, events and fun life. Mostly all stayed in our boring hometown. When I go back to visit my mother, sometimes they pretend to be friends and inquire on how I got that fancy job. HS is just a phase. Bullying is cruel, but all that has an eventual end. Pain doesn't last forever. Happiness is the best revenge. Idiot tries to follow me home because I wouldn't fix his truck for practically free, so I took the scenic route. Don't worry, I called a rescue. Hess, a very entitled veteran and supposedly a Purple Heart one. He's also a very racist MAGA type dumbass. One of the reasons my boss will not absolutely have him as a customer during business hours, but will work on his truck after hours with no one else around. The usual mo is he tries to fix something on his truck and fucks it up, then expects everyone else to fix it for really cheap using his veteran status as a guilt trip because he already had done half the work himself. This time he fixed his brakes and somehow no longer had rear brakes. His truck is 2 bolt failures away from a junkyard. My boss is out of town, so I was in charge for the week with strict instructions to not help him while he's out. He showed up at the shop today demanding I fix his truck. I had already closed the building up and was ready to leave. I told him when G gets back he'll fix your truck. He didn't like that answer. That said something I picked up on to be racist remark and told him to fuck off till G gets back. He gets pissed and grabs a piece of wood and throws it into the desert. I start my drive home and a second or two later, I notice his truck behind me and matching my lane changes. I live 40 miles away, so I knew he wouldn't keep up with me in the hills and I didn't want to kill him by outpacing him, so I call my friend, who's only about 9-10 miles in the middle of the desert, and told him I was gonna swing by because I think I'm being followed and I was gonna take the scenic route. He told me he was gonna meet me at the halfway and if he had to he would scare him off. The scenic route is 7 miles of rough desert road that will destroy any truck without long travel suspension. A lot of locals use it to test and tune their desert off-roaders. I get to the turnoff into the trail and I see his headlights turn in behind me. At that point I shut my lights off and turn on my desert headlights and floor it. I made sure to lure him into the first set of jumps. Right before the jumps I kicked up a bunch of dust and turned off all the lights and waited at the other end. I see his headlights again and I could tell he cleared the first jump, but I could see his headlights shake going down, which is a sign of suspension failure from hitting the ground hard. I turned on all my lights so he could see where I was as I left and proceeded to my friend's location. He was waiting for me with his brother and a big shit-eating grin. He told me he saw me about a mile away because of the lights but couldn't see the other truck behind, and he just said, "Looks like he must have missed the first jump. I'm gonna call rescue." We hung out another few minutes and took a different trail that led me to the highway home. Later in the evening I get a call that he was fine but his truck was literally bent at the cabin bed from the 5-foot drop he experienced. He said he got lost going home. I plan on calling G in the morning and letting him know I'm having the dumbass trespassed from the shop for that stunt. Update: G has been contacted. He's taking my side on this and he's no longer welcomed at the shop. He's been formally trespassed by the sheriffs. I also saw the truck, it's literally bent with the bed and the cab pressed into each other at another shop. Just one drink? Okie dokie. My BFF's neighbors are fairly nice people. I've met them several times. The wife Kay has a tendency to be pushy to get her way at times. Think polite bully that you have to borderline rude to on occasion. My BFF and her husband had to go out of town and I agreed to dog sit their elderly Rottweiler overnight. Sunday evening, around 8:30. Kay knocks on the door to invite me over for a glass of wine. Me thanks but no thanks. Kay, it's not a good time. KO, come on, just one glass. Me, I really can. I'm in the middle of an audit report and I have a deadline. Kay, you can take a break. Why are you working on a Sunday anyway? Me, I need to get this done and I plan to turn in early. She can see I'm already in my PJs. KO, come on, it's just one drink. An hour, tops. Me, fine. One glass. I'll get changed. See you in 5. Rolling eyes face. So, we share a glass of very nice, I must say wine and have a nice visit, and I start getting ready to make my exit. QK laying on the pressure for one more glass because she's not done with my company. A couple of glasses and a couple of hours later, it dawned on me that she had absolutely no intention of allowing me to exit gracefully, and by then I'd gotten my second wind lull. As my audit report was mostly complete and I planned to WFH the next day, I doubled down and did a complete 180. Filling our glasses and keeping the conversation going finally. At long last it's 3:30 AM. At this point she blurts out, "This has been fun, but I've got to go to bed now. I have to work tomorrow. This was a lot of fun. K, we've got to do this again sometime." Spoiler, it hasn't happened. LMOO. Landlord decided to kick out a tenant with a beautiful garden that the person had planted himself, and use the garden to increase rent? Well, get fucked, bitch. Found this subreddit through the click. Thanks dude, this isn't mine. I found it on Twitter and decided to share it here, cause it fits quite well. Friend is being kicked out of his flat that has a garden because the landlord wants to charge much higher rent. Friend has carefully removed every single thing he planted. Landlord, it's worth more with all the fucking plants. How am I meant to get more rent now? The best bit is that he wanted until landlord had taken loads of photos of the garden for the advert, had people round to view and been told contracts have been signed by the new tenants who are expecting a beautiful garden, as opposed to the bare patch of dirt that now exists. Muting this because lots of you seem to really love landlords and some of you think I should chastise my actual friend who is being kicked out of his home specifically so the landlord can make more cash. Cracked. CR Charlotte on TWT. Landlord refuses to make repairs. I own a small business, and have been renting a unit in a complex for about a decade. A few years ago the longtime owner of the complex sold the property to a new group. Initially, they made some nice improvements to the property, updating signage, repaving the parking lot, painting the facade and some other cosmetic work. The terms of my original lease were that the owner of the property handled all repairs to vital infrastructure, plumbing, roofing, etc. The previous owner thought that should be his responsibility since it was his property at the end of the day. During the course of some of the renovations, the power to my AC unit was cut. I didn't realize it as it was winter time when the repairs happened. I run a business where we don't need the heat, and I only run the AC in the late spring through summer, so there's literally a few months where we're not using the HVAC at all. I called my property manager, and he proceeded to tell me it wasn't their problem, and that the terms of our lease were now NNN. Luckily it was just an issue with the outlet and I was able to switch the plug with no issues or additional cost to me. There have been a few other issues that the management refused to address that have been mildly infuriating, namely their repeated insistence that we have a triple net lease. A few months later, we had a water leak. The valve to toilet had failed. Once again the landlord tried to tell me it was my issue, but I fought back this time and produced a copy of my lease that clearly stated that all water-related issues are management's problem. I don't pay for water or gas utility, and it's included in my rent. This is going to be important later. Begrudgingly, he sent a plumber to repair the toilet. While he was here, I mentioned that our utility sink was also dripping, and he should have the plumber look at it. He declined to do so. The drippy faucet has turned into a pretty steady stream. We tried turning the water off at the valves, but the old gate valves have so much calcium buildup, they still won't close all the way. I have mentioned it to our landlord repeatedly, and still no repair. It's been about a year and the faucet continues to consistently run. My dad was a plumber for a while, and I'm perfectly capable of fixing the issue, but out of spite, I refuse to. I had small leak at my house once, and it drove my bill almost $100 for the month over normal. I figure at least $1,000 in water has literally gone down the drain. Not to mention, the water is also being heated by the gas water heater. Lawnmower revenge. So, this just happened over the course of about a week. Match revenge happens at the end of that week as of a few days ago. To set the scene, I've lived in my house for over 8 years now. I've had the same neighbors on my left when looking at the house from the street for that entire time until almost 2 weeks ago, that is. My neighbors were always pretty chill. They were a couple fake names, Ben Violet, and they had lived in their home for over a decade before I bought my house. They lived hard, lots of drinking, some drugs, but not like a meth house or anything like that. Just semi-regular parties with their friends, but nothing super crazy or loud except on a few holidays. Violet was always kind enough to give me a few days heads up though for those extra loud parties so I could make sure my dogs were potted tuckered out so they didn't stress from the noise. I appreciated that. Well, apparently Violet would do more to Rain and Ben, his buddies, even on their normal weekend parties than I knew. Almost 2 weeks ago, Violet got fed up with Ben. Apparently he had gotten into taking steroids. Was getting physically abusive, so she bid me goodbye as she was packing her stuff. She left. After that first night of Violet leaving, about half the nights after that was just Ben partying harder, louder, with more friends than ever each time. The parties went from just kinda loud music that cut off by 0100 when Violet was 3 to super loud music, people yelling until 0330, 0400. Now that she was gone, me other neighbors have called the cops multiple times already. Well, a few nights ago on a weeknight again, Ben was having another rager, and mind you, his main party spot is his carport, which is about 4 feet from my bed on the other side of the wall of my house. Small side lawns between the houses. So by the time 0300 rolled around, they were finally winding down. I was pissed. I'm between jobs doing online school to switch careers, so I had time, nothing stopping me from staying up more, being petty. So I waited until 0430 right as I assumed they would be passed out asleep, then got out my loud as hell lawnmower, started mowing my front lawn, side lawn between my house. Ben's carport as slowly, loudly running over rocks shit as possible. Didn't cut off the mower till almost 0530. The cops never came cause I think they are tired of responding to this street for noise complaints. Now don't worry about the mower blades, I already needed to replace them anyways. Haven't heard a peep from that house in almost a week now. Hopefully that keeps up. Made you late for work and you deserve it. I was at the gym and this little princess had just gotten out of the pool. She was dripping all over the floor and then took off her swimsuit and squeezed it out in the middle of the floor. I told her that was dangerous, especially since there were many elderly women attending that day. She flat out said she didn't have time and didn't care about the floor. She walked off to the showers and I noticed that she had left her locker opened with the key attached to the lock. I picked up her soggy swimsuit and placed it over her work clothes and took the lock off and put it inside the locker and locked the lock. She came back and was so pissed. She kept asking others to go and get an attendant. I walked out and asked at the front desk, but there were not any female staff at the gym yet. She had to wait about an hour for that. With a wet towel and no cosmetics or dry clothes. Her work clothes were also wet. Maybe next time she will plan her day better or have a spare key. Make my mom cry? I'll call you by multiple ex-wives' names. Some necessary backstory: I have relationship with my uncle, Jeff, who is older than my dad. When I was a kid I thought of him as the stereotypical cool uncle, played guitar, rode a motorcycle, that kind of stuff. I always wanted to hang out with him. As I got older I started noticing there was always some tension between him and my dad, but my dad assured me it was family drama from before I was born and not to worry about it. Whatever the drama, Jeff never let it affect his treatment of me. So he was still cool in my book. Now Jeff may have been a cool uncle, but apparently he was very, very, very bad at being a husband. As of me writing this he's had 5 ex-wives. There was no abuse or violence or anything. He was just an emotionally unavailable guy and every subsequent wife got sick of his shit and left. This story is about wife 5. I met her for the first time at a family brunch when I was probably 14 or 15. She had a very unusual name, important for later, so let's call her Ophelia. Ophelia was very sweet to me all afternoon. No red flags, nothing. But after my parents and I returned home, I caught my mom sitting on her bed, crying. My dad was worried, asking her what happened, and after eavesdropping for a bit, I caught snippets of how Ophelia was cold, rude, and nasty to my mom all afternoon. And it was only my mom that she did this to. At a table with about 8 other family members. My mom couldn't figure out why or what she done to make Ophelia treat her like that. As far as I could tell from my teenage vantage point, she'd done nothing wrong. Ophelia was, apparently, just an asshole to her for no reason. Now, my mom is tough as nails. She was born and grew up under a military dictatorship in a foreign country. Point being, she doesn't cry, so whatever it was, it must have been bad. I didn't know exactly what Ophelia said, but I know one thing: you make my mom cry, you're on my shit list. Later that year Jeff and Ophelia came over for a summer barbecue with a bunch of our neighbors. If you're wondering why we bothered inviting them after all that, my parents believe in forgiveness and staying close with family even through difficulties. I, however, am a petty teenage bitch at this point. I gave Jeff a welcome hug, and then as I hugged Ophelia I said loudly, "It's so good to see you again, Jane." Jane was Jeff's wife 1. Ophelia looked shocked, but I guess she chalked it up to an accident or just dumb teenage memory, because she just kinda took it in stride and reminded me of her unusual, impossible to forget name. I apologized and the barbecue went on without another hitch. The next year, Mother's Day brunch with my grandma, my parents, Jeff, and Ophelia. I greet her again by calling her Hannah. You guessed it, wife 2. Another summer barbecue that year. I called her Miranda, wife 3. Unrelated, but Miranda was my favorite of his wives. Yes, I realize I'm making my uncle sound like Henry VIII. By this point I don't know if Ophelia thought I had genuine memory issues, but it was so satisfying watching the way her face would go red and her lips would pinch every time I got her name wrong. I would smile every time like I made an honest mistake, which I'm sure pissed her off more. I never got around to calling her by wife 4's name Jenna because whatever old family drama happened suddenly flared up again. And Jeff and my dad stopped communicating altogether. There was some fallout from that over the years, like Jeff and Ophelia trying to trick my dementia-addled grandma into changing her will in their favor, which was my final straw with my uncle, but otherwise I haven't heard from them since. And if you're wondering if Ophelia managed to stick it out as wife 5, you should know that I signed up for Ancestry to start making a family tree, and by pure happenstance I found Jeff and Ophelia's divorce papers in the online records. Good luck to wife 6, I guess. Mill want a baby picture. Please do not repost or use my story. Thanks. It's probably not all that interesting anyway, but just in case. Short and sweet, but who so petty. My Mill, who couldn't care less about our little family except every so often, asked for us to send her pictures of our baby. She was in the waiting room during her birth, but I don't think she stuck around long enough to see her through the viewing window. So she's probably never seen her in person to my recollection. But she loves using FB to look like she's this Sparkles, wonderful Sparkles, grandmother who loves all her grandbabies. DH sent her all pictures of Phil, her ex-husband, one and the bane of her existence, holding our daughter. Added I should add Lo is almost a year old now. She really doesn't care that much at all. DH dear husband Lo little one. My dad trans has discovered how to beat transphobes in the South. Someone said this should go here. We're currently in the South visiting family. When we were at a restaurant, my dad FTM had to go to the bathroom. I'm still not entirely sure how, but a guy in there determined that he was trans and went shouting to the barman to kick my dad out. My dad, instead of trying to win that argument in a bar full of Southerners, decided to go the complete other direction. He channeled his inner Southern righteous fury and went off on that man for accusing him of being a transgender, demanded he be kicked out, and called the guy an agent of Satan. Long story short, it worked. Got the other guy and his family kicked out, and got a free beer for his troubles. I thought this sub would appreciate that. Added I should mention that my dad has been trans for 45 years and is the most passing person you've ever met. That's why I say I'm not sure how. Unless the guy straight up looked over the stall door, there's no way to tell. My date blew me off for not buying him sushi. I got $400 omakase instead. Hi. So there was this event at a bar that I was planning to go to this weekend, and I asked this guy to be my date that night as I don't like being alone in crowded unfamiliar places. At first he seemed quite enthusiastic as he messaged me a lot about it. One time, he causally mentioned how expensive going out in NYC has become, which is true BTW. I went, no worry. I will pick up the tab and we will have a good time. I genuinely did not think of it as a big deal, since I am not the most frugal person in the world. So the night before our supposed date, I wanted to confirm everything and messaged him that well, we can also grab something to eat beforehand. What kind of food do you like? He got back to me, saying there is a sushi place in Queens he wants to try. Initially, I was struck this being bizarre, as the bar is in the West Village and if we do what he wants, I'd have to forfeit most of the night to be in Queens. And the only reason why we're even hanging out is because I wanted to go to this bar. So I made a logical response, suggesting we could get something else near the bar. He became unresponsive. When I pressed for a confirmation from him for the itinerary, he said he needed to think about it. At this point, I'd realize he really takes me for a meal ticket. He's trying to get me capitulated to his demands, as it's already Friday night and I am running out of options of people still free and available, which as matter of fact I was. He really derailed my plan, and I pulled out my phone and booked myself a $400 17-course omakase at a very nice place in the village. I had blast with the insanely delicious meal and I posted the picture of the sushi to my Instagram stories. He messaged me later, claiming he's sorry and he got busy with family, blah blah blah. I blocked him immediately. My pettiest revenge story. A few years ago, my girlfriend at the time was invited to a backyard cookout sleepover hosted by one of her co-workers. Significant others were also invited, so I went with her. Everyone was having a good time, however there was one guy, the boyfriend of a different co-worker I'll call Bob, who was being extremely obnoxious. You know the type, kept bringing up politics, race, stuff, trying to argue with people about it, etc. It wasn't the time or place to be bringing up that crap. These weren't his buddies, they were his girlfriend's co-workers. None of the significant others really knew each other or the co-workers. And because everyone wanted to be polite, no one was calling him out for acting like an asshat. We decided to play Cards Against Humanity, and one of the white cards I ended up with was Quinceañera, Based on my interactions with Bob, I had a feeling he would have a lot trouble pronouncing a Spanish word. I purposely played that card when it was his turn to read aloud the answer cards, and as expected, he was unable to correctly say the word quinceañera, even after multiple attempts. Each time he tried, he'd get more frustrated and started turning red. Everyone laughed at his struggle to pronounce the word, which led to him rage quitting the game and silently sulking for the rest of the night. I didn't tell anyone about my small potato's evil plan to embarrass him, and didn't tell the girlfriend until the next day. She also got a good laugh. Sometimes the smallest of victories can taste the sweetest. Neighbors keep parking in front of our gate. This habit of theirs became quite annoying because we had to ask them to move every single time, especially when running late on appointments. They were pretty stubborn though and refused to park elsewhere, much less in their own garage. Now our gate offered minimal visibility. I cannot see who's outside. They cannot see if someone is about to open a gate. So one time, after making sure their car was parked in front of the gate, I let loose the gate, pushing it as hard as I possibly can. They never parked in front of the gate again. Next tenant was cheap, wanted my stuff for nearly nothing. She didn't get to keep anything. This happened several years ago. I rented from a social housing society in the Netherlands. Over here the renter is responsible for flooring, wallpaper or paint, gardening themselves. I had taken great care and great pride in both decorating the house and growing a beautiful garden. When I moved, I talked with the next tenant to see what she wanted to keep, but for a price, of course. That's how things are over here. But she was cheap and refused to agree upon a reasonable price for the lot. I got the feeling she gambled I was not able to remove the lot anyway. She gambled wrong. I gathered a bunch of friends and within 2 days everything was gone. Bare concrete floors, bare concrete walls, bare old dirty wooden stairs. The minimal kitchen and the garden was just an empty, flat, black soil wasteland. Everything was gone, including the 3MX5M wooden shed. The fence at the very back, gone. All the nice tiles, plants and flowers, bushes and a pear tree, gone. I was very pleased when I closed the door of that house behind me one final time. Later I heard from a friend who lived a couple of houses down the road from that house, that the new lady was upset with how she found the place, but there was nothing she could do about it. Well, perhaps the lady learned a thing. Noisy neighbors. So this happened about 20 years ago. We had lived in a small terraced property for about a year before our neighbors changed. These were 100-year-old cold and uninsulated homes, and the walls between them didn't block noise particularly well. A nice couple moved in next doors and they seemed pleasant and polite. They said they would be having a moving-in party, so we thought nothing of it as we're quite tolerant. The following weekend, Friday or Saturday, can't remember, but it didn't disrupt work for us. The party started and ended in the early hours. No drama, all okay we thought. Until a couple of weeks later, and the weekend after that, and so on. As the year progressed it was warmer in the evenings, and they liked to stand outside the back door, which was almost underneath our bedroom window. Our patience was wearing thin at this point, and one particularly warm evening when we wanted the window open to cool the room down, there was no chance due to the music, shouting and smoke wafting up to our window. I had reached breaking point and asking them nicely didn't change anything. I made the decision and searched my man drawer, which still included random items from earlier years. I located a carefully wrapped pristine packet of stink bombs, the mini glass bottle ones. We made sure the lights were off, and carefully opened the window. I listened for a while and followed the ebb and flow of music and conversation. I timed the next peak, and dropped the stink bomb out of the window. I could just hear a faint chink as it smashed, then several seconds later the loudest shouting we'd heard for several weeks, followed by a scream and a slammed door. Then quiet, for the rest of the night. They never said anything after that, nor did we, but the parties were always a bit quieter and shorter after that. I still have a couple stored just in case, as you never know. Not a Chinese takeaway. Growing up, our house number was one digit from the local Chinese takeaway. On a batch on menus sent out, our number was put on instead. Friday, Saturday, Sunday we'd get calls trying to place orders. Didn't matter how many times we'd tell people they were calling a private number and not a takeaway, we still got calls. The Chinese refused to do anything about it, and my parents didn't see that they should change their number, so my dad would take orders putting on different voices, tell them it'd be 40 minutes for delivery if they called back. He'd apologize and tell them he'd throw in some free spring rolls or whatever the driver was just leaving. If they called back again, he'd tell them they'd called the wrong number and gave the actual restaurant's number for them to call and complain to. Went on for a few weeks, but the menus were done sent out. The takeaway ended up changing number in a bid to stop my dad taking orders. Ongoing, two-way pettiness. I had a really terrible boyfriend who lived with me for a few years. He was awful in many ways, but one of the more innocuous ways was with trash. I live in the country and trash service isn't available here, so we have to drive it a couple miles down the road to the transfer station. It's kind of great, because it's free, and it's open for long hours several days a week. I was used to taking it myself, but when he moved in, he was supposed to take over, largely because he had a truck. He did it for a little while, but then started weaponizing his competence. He always piled the kitchen trash so full and refused to take it out, so when I finally did, it was impossible to get it out of the can and tie the bag up without trash falling all over the floor. It was infuriating. He stopped taking trash to the transfer station altogether, and claimed his truck wasn't reliable enough for me to drive it literally 2.5 miles each way, so I had to use my car. This isn't an issue now that he's gone, because I am not messy about the trash. It's easy not to be. Before I accepted that he wasn't going to do it, I pestered him, and he would simply say no, or I'll do it later. But then he never would. The large trash bin on the back porch had been full for a while, and when I gave up and went to take it myself, it was full of fucking maggots. I got some on my hands and nearly vomited. In all my years, I've never once had maggots in my trash. This guy was very into recycling. I don't care so much, but I did it anyway. But then I found out the recycling goes right in with the trash when it leaves the transfer station. I have no idea why they have a separate dumpster for recycling when it all just goes in the landfill, but I know for sure that the only thing they actually recycle is corrugated cardboard. I didn't tell him. I continued flattening boxes and recycling them, but for cans and other recyclables, I started just tossing them in the trash with everything else. We were both drinking heavily at the time, and he would leave all of his empty cans piled on the coffee table for me to clean up every day. Recycling was apparently so important to him, he got mad about it every time he saw a can in the kitchen garbage and would put it in the recycling can that I still left outside. He was such an awful asshole, and he got mad about it all the time, but I was so mad about the trash, I didn't care. When I took stuff to the transfer station, it all went in the same dumpster, which made no difference at all, but watching him try to keep up with all the cans in the kitchen trash was a little satisfying. Pass me over? Okay. I'll leave. This is only a small piece of pettiness on my part. I have a 0-hours contract working in hospitality. A full-time supervisor role came up, and since I have experience in that area, I thought, why not? Interview went really well with the assistant manager. We had a laugh and a chit-chat along with answering the same old boring questions. I added flair. Don't worry. Soon after, I had a minor illness, the kind you don't want to be around food, so took 4 days off to be clear of it. My first day back is a training day. Comments are made about being short-staffed, unable to fill more of the 0-hours contracts, and how we need some help. Luckily, they've filled the supervisor role and she'll be starting next week. It ain't me, and this is the first time I'm hearing I've clearly been unsuccessful in my application. I get a half-assed apology from the manager at the end of the day's sessions with I like to do these things in person, but you were off sick. You would have gotten the role, yet the other candidate can fill the hours we need. They wanted me to guarantee I could work 60, 70 hours a week despite this not being what the job states entails. I told them I'd happily do 50, 60 in the busy season, which I think is more than satisfactory to anyone else. Anyhow, I left for home and get a call for a job I had interviewed for before I went off sick. I was hedging my bets and glad I did. So I'll be off to a 3-day work week elsewhere for more money. See you later. Oh, and good luck filling that extra 0-hours role with no job security. Added, personally, I think they thought they'd got lucky finding someone for the supervisor role. They were struggling for months and presumed I'd stay on the very needed lower role. Now they are down 3 needed members instead of just 2. Person held up the lift, so I pressed the lift button on every floor on the walk down. Was about to take out a bunch of rubbish and press the button for the lift. Nothing happens for a few minutes and I can hear people talking from the floor above where they must be holding up the lift. I press the button a few more times, which they must have heard because I could follow half their conversation. Still no movement in the lift. After a few more minutes I get impatient and take the stairs instead. Managed to press the lift button on each floor whilst juggling my bin bags. By the time I made it down and had thrown away all my rubbish, I got the satisfaction of seeing the lift stop at the last 2 floors and someone walking out with a very annoyed look on her face. TLDR is in the title, really. Person next to me on a plane kept violating my personal space. I was flying in the window seat, because I like looking out the window. The woman sitting next to me reached in front of me multiple times to close the window shade. She never asked me. She just reached directly in front of me to close the shade. I would immediately reopen it, and a few minutes later, she would reach in front of me again to close it. It was a noon domestic short-haul flight, so no reason to need darkness in the middle of the day, and absolutely no excuse for violating my personal space multiple times without asking me or acknowledging me or treating me like a human in any way. So I pulled out my book and turned on the reading light, despite there being ample natural light from the open window for me to read. I then positioned my hands in such a way that my watch would reflect the reading light directly into her eyes. I read like that for an hour, jiggling my hand the entire time, so it would shine the light back and forth across her eyes and be super distracting and annoying. Once we landed and she took her headphones off, I turned to her and said, "Next time you fly, book a window seat if you want to control the window. Or at least treat me like a human. And ask me before you violate my personal space. What you did is unbelievably rude." She looked so offended. And naturally she walked 2 miles per hour. Being a city walker, I easily got in front of her. Then once we were on a moving walkway, I stopped immediately in front of her. Did the same on the escalator to the curb, before flipping her off the entire way to my ride. Edit wanted to make a slight clarification that I was subtly flipping her off by extending my middle finger while holding the handle of my bag, so it was upside down and you only would have noticed if you were looking at my hand. It wasn't like I was just holding up to her face. I was angry and it was a subtle way for me to voice my anger and get it out of my system. Petty PS4 revenge. Back when I was in college, I shared with some classmates that became my close friends. We also had another friend, he'll call Tommy, from our class, who didn't live with us but was often hanging out in ours. One day Tommy just decided he really didn't like me, still not sure what I did to him. Anyway, he started spreading rumors about me. Petty crap that school kids would do, but this resulted in a few classmates not talking to me anymore. My housemates stayed out of it and remained neutral. The final straw was when I found out he had been texting my GF at the time trying to get her to break up with me. Luckily she wasn't dumb enough to fall for it. Anyway, a few weeks later, the dust had settled. People still were not talking to me, but I'd moved on, but was still annoyed at how easy Tommy had gotten away with this. One evening as I was logging onto my PS4, I noticed that he still had his player profile saved on my console, so about once a month for the next year I would log into his account and delete all his friends, give him a few weeks and then do the same again once the list built back up. Found out a few years later from an old classmate that went through the same with Tommy a couple of years later. He genuinely could not understand why his list kept disappearing and it would drive him crazy whenever he noticed it gone again. Smiley face. Petty revenge sent from God himself. Hi, this is a story that happened about 15 years ago. Enjoy. PS If you pick this up, big fan here. All the love to you, your fam and Hugo. So, at the time I was about 25 meters and used to work in a casino. Me and my co-worker, let's call him Zed, shared a flat. We're basically roommates. On one weekend he was free and I worked the night. He went drinking with some other colleagues. After the shift I went straight to bed. It wasn't long that Zed came home drunk with a few of the colleagues and they thought it would be hilarious if they barge into my room screaming at the top of their lungs. Well, yay. I think I peed a little from the scare and shock. To his defense, he did apologize and he didn't do anything like that ever again. He was a straight and good guy all in all, but with hiccups in his judgment. So, to the revenge part. 1 week went by and it was Sunday morning. This time I was free and he had the night at the casino. That morning I wanted to go for a run and go get a coffee and breakfast from a hotel cafeteria nearby. It was cheap and good. For a all-you-can-eat buffet, €8. As soon as I opened the door, there they stood. Angels sent from God himself. 2 little old ladies with Bibles in their hands and a bunch of Jehovah's Witnesses brochures. The conversation went like so: me, good morning. Rolling eyes face, lol, good morning. Do you have time? We want to talk to you about God and Jesus Christ our Savior. Me looking for a way to escape by jumping out of the 3rd-story window. Then it struck me, the light from above me. I'm so sorry, I have an urgent appointment, but my friend, I know for a fact, he is very interested in this topic and he tried to talk to me about exactly this topic the other day. Step right in and just go through that door into his room. He will be so happy to be able to talk to you. You could literally see a fire blazing in their eyes as I told them that. They stepped in. I closed the door and off I was. About 2 hours later I get a call. It's my roommate. To cut the conversation short, the little old lady's barges into his room, sat on his bed, woke him up and just started talking. He, in a sleepy stupor, was flabbergasted, and couldn't even say a word. Also, he used to sleep naked and he was clinging to his blanket as if his life depended on it. The ladies talked to him for a good hour and a half, and because he is a polite guy, and because he was in a state of shock, didn't kick them out but listened to them the whole time. When they were done, they gave him a couple of their brochures and left the apartment. He needed the next 30 minutes just to get his bearings and realize that he in fact isn't dreaming. I laughed so hard I nearly choked on my coffee. To this day, he says it was the best revenge served to him ever. Hope you enjoyed the story. Leave a like if you did. Push past me on the bus? Gimme your seat. This happened a few months ago in winter. I was waiting at my college bus stop. I'm one of the first to get there and I'm at what should be the front of the line, but unfortunately, as the other Friday-only course kids crowded round, I was basically in the dead center of a perfumed, sweaty mosh pit. The issue is I have dyspraxia, Tourette's syndrome, autism and ADHD. Dyspraxia fucks up my balance and coordination. Tourette's syndrome makes me jerk, tense, and flex my limbs uncontrollably. My autism makes me have severe sensory issues to do with sound, touch and smell. And my ADHD means I need to stim, basically a variety of actions which calm me down, in order to not have a full-on mental breakdown. All these combined made me very tense, stressed, and pained because when my muscles tense for long enough while standing in the same place, they get really sore and sometimes even cramp. But I can't sit down on the bus stop bench because of the crowd, so I'm stuck there. It's also Scottish winter, so, you know, freezing and wet, so the chill goes straight to your bones. When the bus eventually comes, I start asking the people who have cut in front of me if I can get through because I'm disabled, but they all ignore me. One girl was actually behind me in the crowd but somehow managed to sandwich past me to get in front, forcing me into an even tighter space, just so she could get a seat on the bus. This royal pissed me off. So, when I eventually got on the bus, it was at neat maximum capacity. I saw the girl who pushed past me sitting leisurely in a disabled seat. Now, you don't have to be disabled to sit in the disabled seats, but people with disabilities do have priority. My standing issues I've already discussed, combined with my dyspraxic balance issues, makes it so I absolutely need to sit down or I will dangle round the bar like a wind chime, my joints clicking a melody. So, I go up to the girl and say, in my softest customer service voice, "Hi, I'm disabled, is it okay if I have this seat?" For context, I'm goth and have a resting bitch face, which mechanically changed to a smile as I spoke. This may have been intimidating Lamau. She immediately got up and I sat down. It was still cramped, but I had a seat with enough legroom to stretch and relax them from the pain and cold. She forced her way onto the bus to become of the first people on to get the comfier disabled seats, only to lose her seat to the person she pushed past. I know teenagers are shitty and they grow to learn empathy, but I sincerely hope this was learning opportunity for her. Since then I've just started waiting inside my campus to get a later, emptier bus, even if it makes me an hour later home. But I still look back at this and smile. Added, I should probably mention she was sat on the aisle seat with her friend at the window. I took the aisle seat, which basically separated them and made them unable to talk without me hearing them, so they were silent, staring at each other than me the whole 35-minute journey. Refuse to own up? That'll cost you $9,000 a year. This is the longest I've ever committed to something other than my marriage or career, and I don't intend to stop. About a year ago, I stopped at a 6-lettered, blue-colored grocery store that underpays its employees to pick up some tomatoes. While I was in there, a microburst came through and blew some stuff around. Not strong enough to topple trees, but some decent wind gusts. This particular store chose to have their cart corrals freestanding with no weights or bolting to the ground. One of these corrals, empty of carts, was blown into the back of my relatively new car at the time, putting a sizable dent on the trunk deck. The signage on the sides of the corral more or less acted as a sail, and since the whole thing weighed so little, it just spun in place and slammed in the car. Corrals with as little as one cart in them were unaffected, and all of this was captured on dashcam. I moved the corral after I got back to check the damage, and a particularly energetic fart could have moved this thing. Long story short, I ended up in contact with their legal team and was informed that they would not be taking responsibility, as the corrals needed to be mobile to clean the parking lot. When I asked what would have happened if the corral had hit a person walking, the lawyer refused to talk to me anymore other than to say, "We will not be taking responsibility." I informed her that we would no longer be shopping at their chain, and we've stuck to that religiously. Total damage to the car about $3,000, total lost gross sales $13,000 and counting. I know it barely affects their bottom line, but it brings me great satisfaction every time I pass by the store with groceries from somewhere yellow or green, and for less money to boot. Added, to be clear, my insurance company covered with a small deductible as it was considered comprehensive, and despite my protestations, would not go after the store. Reported my ex after I found out she was in a new relationship. My girlfriend broke up with me the day after Christmas, so that was nice. She claimed she wasn't going to date anytime soon and I believed her. Crucial to the story, but she is an illegal immigrant and has been for like a decade. A few days after she ended things with me, I got a message from a friend saying she was in a relationship, and I was like, WTF. So I did what any sane person would do and reported her to ICE. To make matters worse, she's engaged to this guy now after less than 3 months of dating him. Revenge on school, playing the same song on repeat between 8 a.m. and 6 p.m. for 10 days. Firstly, I live in a European country where healthcare is publicly funded. Second, I'm a nurse. Think emergency services. I make $45K a year, and have to work all holidays. Third, I work nights. This college right next to me has this thing every spring where they build floats and do a parade. I'm all for it, let the kids have fun. They however pick a horrible song and blast it in the parking lot, which is right next to our building, from 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. every day for 10 days straight. After a few days I was desperate for sleep. That week the weather was beautiful, people were drinking heavily and many of these required emergency care on top of all the usual cardiac arrest, shootings and whatnot. I closed the window and died from the heat but I could still hear it. I had the windows closed and bought earplugs. I could still hear it. I slept 2 hours before my 10-hour shifts. I called the college and asked to talk to the person in charge, left my details but no one got back to me. I called again the next day and asked to talk to person in charge finally get the man on the line. I explained my problem, and asked if they could do something about the volume or change the song. He laughed and said it was tradition. I said I wasn't able to work if I couldn't sleep, and asked who was going to pay for my loss of income. He answered that he already did that by paying tax. I asked him a few things about their permits, asked him if he wanted things to go this way. He said yes. I called the police not emergency number, explained the situation and that he'd said that he was the one paying me my wages. The police did not like that since they get to hear the same thing all the time. Then I referenced a new law about public disturbing with music. The next day the music was way down. The next year I couldn't hear it unless I went outside and stood completely still. Turns out I ruined a 50-year-old tradition, and my bitch walk got an extra bounce. Do not mess with a sleep-deprived nurse. Added to add if he hadn't pulled the I pay your wages and laughed, I wouldn't have been so furious that I called the police. The college kids can actually thank him, zany face. And here's the song that year added to the response and support has overwhelmed me. This is the best birthday present I could have wished for. I've felt kinda guilty over doing this since it happened. Thank you Redditors. Rude guy wanted my parking spot. Of course he ain't getting it. I just finished a gym session, went back to my car. I turned on my car and just wanted to take a breather before driving. Not even 30 seconds pass and a car behind me honks at me. I guess he really wants my spot since it is close to the entrance. But damn bro, have some fucking patience. After only like another 30 seconds, I was ready to back out until I saw that he positioned his car directly behind me that I couldn't even get out. After that, I was dead set on making sure this guy doesn't get the spot. I turned off my car engine and sat there. I already finished my gym sesh. I can wait. Prob after 5 minutes, the guy finally leaves. I deliberately waited until I saw another car coming to back out my car. Another car took my spot in the end. Haha. Rude. Then chase down your check. So I was waiting in line at the bank, outdoors. Gets annoying sometimes when it's raining, but yesterday, it just got a bit windy, so all good. Some guy rolled up by car. As he's getting out, check in hand, the wind snatched it, but I somehow managed to step on it as it scooted by me. Now I didn't really expect a thank you or anything, but what I definitely didn't see coming was the guy getting upset at me for dirtying up his check. Great job. Now the bank probably won't take it. Thanks for nothing. Oh boy, was caught a bit off guard there. So I just lifted my foot back up, letting the check blow away and said yeah, they definitely won't accept it now. He flipped his shit as he was chasing it down the street, before eventually giving up. Sorry not sorry. Scammer almost got me. So I created 2 Google Voice numbers and called them back non-stop. I'm a new dad. I'm sleep deprived and just feel sluggish all the time. After dropping my baby off with her grandparents, I saw an invoice on my email for $450 that I never paid to Norton Antivirus. It had a phone number to call. So, I called it. As soon as I called, I realized it was a scam, but it sure as heck aggravated me. I pretended to be scammed up until the point where I'd give my computer control to the scammers, which took a good 10 minutes. I spoke to Melvin after that. I told him he's a dumb scammer and he yelled at me. So, I realized the number was still there. I have 2 Google Voice accounts I don't use anymore that I had for a prior job. So I called him. I kept calling. I kept asking for Melvin. Sometimes, I'd get a new guy who didn't know my game. Fortunately, I didn't have anything urgent at work that day, so I kept calling. I called and called and called. At some point, one of the gentlemen let out an exasperated sigh, saying, "Oh my God, it's you again." I didn't relent. I kept calling. I called over and over and over and over again. I told as many of them as possible that their mothers are ashamed of them. I told them that their lives are wastes. I kept calling and calling until I actually had work to do, and so I stopped. Today, I woke up and called the number. Today, they were PayPal. I got Melvin again. We chatted before he told me to fuck off. I called again. I kept calling non-stop for about 30 minutes. After an hour break, I tried calling again. Immediately blocked on all my numbers. I grabbed a family member's phone. Immediately disconnected. I win. It was a small, insignificant battle, but I won. No one can call that number anymore. Until next time. So petty. He thought he drove a hard bargain, but years later my petty revenge still warms my heart. I had bought a new king-size bed frame and mattress and needed to get my queen-size futon and its wooden bed frame out of there before the new stuff was delivered the next day. The futon and bed frame were clean and in like new condition, so I was asking $250, a fraction of what it had cost me, and figured realistically I'd probably get $200 or $175. A couple expressed interest and came over to take a look. I told them the price was $250, but the husband decided to play hardball and offered $50. I was pissed that he was wasting my time. It took a while to get there and he was really obnoxious about it, but we finally agreed on $150 and I stood back while he disassembled the frame and carried it all out. I was glad to get rid of the bed, and for only $25 less than what I thought my lowest price would be. But what he didn't know was that I had intended to throw in around $500 worth of bedding for free, all of the sheet sets, some still new and bag, and the mattress cover, to whoever bought the bed. I decided to keep it all, even though I didn't have a bed to use them on any longer, just because he'd been such a douche-a-noozle. Plus, I'd been planning to, but decided not to tell them about a couple of the bed's idiosyncrasies. I didn't tell them to be careful of the sharp corners of the frame that jutted out and needed to be covered. They'd find out for themselves that they'll hit the sharp corners and end up with bruises every time they go by. And I didn't tell them to watch out for the legs of the bed frame that were closer to the edge of the frame than you'd expect, so that you constantly stub your toes unless you wrap the legs in towels. It's years later and I still think, served him right. Some petty college roommate revenge I still laugh at. Decided I'd write it down for others to enjoy. Backstory: when I was a 19 meters now 25 meters in college, I had 3 assigned roommates. They didn't buy any of the necessities like food, toilet paper, cooking oil, cleaning supplies, paper towels, etc. I was buying pretty much everything, which I definitely couldn't afford, but I wanted to be nice. I said I was fine with them using my things as long as they replaced them. Whenever they used something up, lo and behold, they never replaced it. I'd just find it missing. They would start mentioning we were missing it, and we should get more. I would say then buy some, then they changed the subject. If they did buy something, they put it in their own room. I was being polite, but inside I was burning with a white-hot fury, infuriated beyond belief. So pretty much a classic story of college dudes. I'm sure there are plenty of people who can relate here. Anyway, fast forward to an early morning class. I'm getting ready to leave, and my roommate is putting dishes in the dishwasher before he goes to class. The previous night I told him he needed to start doing dishes because he constantly cooked and never cleaned soap. I was really happy to see it was getting done. He was also getting ready for class. I was grabbing a bite to eat when he said we need more dishwasher pods. I said buy them. He paused, then said dish soap would work, also mine. I told him not to and it would. Shut up and just buy the damn pods. He said to believe him and it would work. He proceeded to fill the cap, started it and went to shower for class. I proceeded to end the cycle and dump about a cup or more of dishwasher detergent, and out of spite then started again. I went to class munching on a bagel, excited for the text he might send. It felt good to think of what he'd find after the shower. Went to class and 40 meters later, yes, he showered for 40 meters every day. I got a snapshot of our apartment and I swear to God read it, there was suds everywhere. It was awesome. We could have hosted a bubble run or a nightclub with then bubbles in that apartment. Wish I still had the photo. It was insane. I didn't realize how many bubbles could be made from one dishwasher. I mean, I anticipated a lot, but it was way more. It was so much it was up to his chest. He had to cancel going to class to clean it and then bought pods. I still laugh about his reaction. He said, holy shit, I really didn't think it would be that bad. I'd add in, yeah man, I really thought that was gonna work. Would have been a great life hack to not buy pods. He apologized. Started pitching in more with things. The end. Someone who is obviously much more important than me. It appears that gas prices are going up 14 a liter tonight, and the radio and the news have been telling us to fill out today. So, on my way home I went to Costco. Big mistake. I spent a good 30 minutes driving from the mall entrance to the gas station. At this location there's a few stores that you can drive around and get to the gas a bit more quickly when it's not busy. When it's insane, they block it off with a line of pylons and shopping carts. Just as I'm about to pull into the proper station area, douchebag in a GT with douchebag hair and greasy goatee smugly gets out of his car and starts moving pylons so he can bypass the line we all spent 30 minutes in. Assuming any competency on his part, he would have merged in behind me. So I went to inch forward and intentionally stalled it. No gas and aggressive clutch. Started her up and stalled it again. Did this 2 more times until the attendant arrived and put the pylons back up in front of him, stealing back a seat. Okay, so I'm currently on vacation in Mexico. Yesterday I went on a day trip and my hotel was the first one picked up. so I grabbed the back seat since no one else had wanted it. I chose my seat last and stretched out. We stop at a second hotel and wait 20 minutes for people who never showed up. After waiting, the excursion continued on. The next stop is the main office for the company to pick up the tour guide and for a bathroom break. At this stop I leave my stuff on the seat and go to the bathroom. When I get back to bus, the 3 people we had waited for had shown up. 2 of them had also decided to move my stuff and steal my seat. In addition to stealing my seat, they had also put their backpacks on the seat in front them, claiming that one as well. I was pissed. I grabbed my stuff that they had moved and find another seat. We go about the day and have a wonderful excursion. The last stop was for lunch at a beach club. Before getting off the bus, the guide told us to take our stuff. The bus had gotten full of sand and it was being exchanged for a clean one. At this point no one now has a seat on the bus. Everything is up for grabs. So what do? I grab my original seat. The lady who had moved my stuff gets back on the bus and comes to the back and looks at me. She says there is not enough room for 3 people. I look at her and shrug my shoulders. Off she goes. Another seat. Was I petty AF? Yes I was, and I regret nothing. Step on my foot, you pay. A few years ago I was in the large city near where I live. I had parked my car in a big garage where you pay at a kiosk. When you return, take your ticket, then you go to your car and put the paid ticket in the gate. Well, there were 2 kiosks when I walked up and a woman was using the one on the right. So I stepped up to the one on the left. I guess the one on the right wasn't working. So the woman stepped right in front of me. She didn't actually step on my foot, but that was pure luck. Well, the lady was not only in too much of a hurry to be polite, she also rushed off with her paid ticket in the machine. For anyone else, I would have held the ticket, waited for them to return, and then handed the ticket to them personally. In this case I took the ticket. Not only did she pay for my parking expensive in a big city, but that garage's policy is that if you lose your ticket you have to pay for 24 hours of parking. Thanks lady. Teaching my mother a lesson. Bit of background. My mother is extremely dramatic and emotionally manipulative. Out of her 3 children, I 42F am the only one who still speaks to her. She's also very particular about her name. She abhors anyone shortening or messing around with her name. Christine. Anyone who calls her Chris, or Chrissy, anything like that is subjected to a tongue lashing and mild hysterics. I have a son 4 who she often claims is her favorite. She has 3 other grandsons, so I hate it that she does this and am pregnant with my second child. I talked to my mother about her name choices, Ash or Morgan, and she told me she hated them and tried to persuade us to choose something else. I named our first child and it's important to my husband that he names the next one, so I'd like to let him even if they're not my favorite names. I don't think grandparents get a choice. So my mother told me outright that if we choose these names she won't use them and will pick a name of her own to call the baby and will only refer to him by her choice of name. So I lost my patience. I told her that if she wanted to do that she'd face 2 consequences. 1, she'll likely never get to speak to the new child. 2, I will teach both of my kids to call her Grandma Chrissy. She's never mentioned names since. The neighbor and Wi-Fi. So about 10 or so years ago we were living in a duplex when a woman and her teenage son moved in next door. The woman had just left her marriage and was seemingly unhappy about it. We got along, felt sorry for her situation. She needed internet, so we let her use our Wi-Fi. She was a single mother with 2 sons, 1 at home, so we thought we'd help her out for a while. We were a couple with an almost teenage child. We got along well. I'd have coffee at her place after work most days, and a lot of the neighborhood kids including mine would hang out at her place. Then things changed. For one reason or another she decided that she didn't want to be friends with me but still wanted the free internet and for my child to hang out at hers. I still don't know why she stopped our friendship. As soon as this started I stopped allowing my child to hang out at her place. Magically, her internet became patchy. She'd knock on our door asking about it. My husband said he'd get around to it. He would. Eventually, then her internet would stop when her treatment of me worsened, which happened to be the times when my husband was away. The better or worse her behavior towards me dictated the quality of internet she would get. Sometimes hers would be stopped altogether for a day or 2. The pattern continued. She'd get nasty, her free internet would stop, she'd knock on the door asking for my husband to fix it. He'd either be away or just didn't want to. What she didn't know was that I also had the ability to choose the speed of her internet and if she would get any. She never picked up on the pattern. Eventually her internet was completely stopped. I also had a fake phone call where I knew she could hear me pretending to tell a friend how happy I was that we'd bought the 2 units, so she thought we were her new landlords. We rented through a real estate. Don't piss off the people who give you free internet. The time my boyfriend chronically lied and cheated on me, so I stole his mom. When I was 23, I was in my first somewhat long-term relationship, and my first relationship in which we lived together. It was a bit rocky. We both caused a lot of problems in the relationship, but we finally broke up when I found out my boyfriend had been cheating on me regularly. He had also been lying about working an unpaid internship that would have transitioned to a job, which allowed him to spend hours going out with other women and excused his lack of income, so I was partly supporting him financially along with his mom, who he was also lying to. Even though my relationship with him was never stable, his mom loved me and would often openly take my side when we were fighting. She had 4 sons and no daughters, and she told me she considered me the daughter she never had. So when the cheating and lying was uncovered, it wasn't hard to get her to take my side. She was the person I went crying to, and I told her that this is the sort of thing you cry about to your mom. And since I don't have a relationship with my own mom, I was glad she was there for me to talk to. She was, of course, furious with him for lying to us both, effectively scamming us out of our money, and for cheating on me. Even when he complained to her about everything I had done wrong in the relationship, she refused to believe him because in her eyes I could do no wrong. She sat him in front of a computer and made him apply for jobs in front of her, then supervised his job search process the way one might supervise a child cooking for the first time. Once he found a job, she made him pay us both back for the money we spent supporting him while he was lying to us. After he had finished paying us back and moved out of her place, she spoke to him rarely and was very clear that she no longer trusted him. She even warned his next girlfriend that he was a cheater, and from what I've since heard, she was right too, as he has apparently cheated on other girlfriends since. She and I remained close until she passed away 2 years ago. She was one of the maybe 3 people I've ever felt I could be truly vulnerable with. She was the only person I told about a particularly difficult mental health situation I was going through, and I really did start to see her as a surrogate mother. TLDR, my boyfriend cheated on me and lied to me and his mother to get us to financially support him. When it was uncovered, I managed to get her to unequivocally take my side, and she remained closer to me than to him for the rest of her life. The waiting game, a buyer's revenge. About 2 years ago, I wanted to buy some stuff for my daughter from an online listing. I agreed with the seller on a price and we set up a meeting for me to pick up the items. But just before the meeting, the seller texted me saying he sold the items to someone else at a higher price. I was pretty ticked off because we had agreed on a deal and I had made arrangements to meet him. Just to mess with him, I told him I'd actually be willing to pay a higher amount, and he agreed to sell me the products again. We arranged to meet at a subway station to do the deal, and 5 minutes after the agreed time, I texted him to say I'd be a little late. 15 minutes later, I said I was almost there, just about 10 minutes away. I kept texting him similar messages for over an hour, asking him to wait for me and that I'd be there soon. Obviously, I was at home the whole time. So after about 90 minutes of making him wait at the subway, I texted him saying I found the same items cheaper elsewhere and that I wouldn't be coming after all. I don't think he understood the move, but it felt good anyway. There's always a bigger fish. Not my story, but from a good friend. This couple was going through a bad divorce. They both owned a small business. He owned a bar, and she owned a local events company that did events in bars. Things like dating nights, trivia, darts, etc. The divorce got ugly, but they finally resolved it and largely went their separate ways. That is until the husband started promoting competing events at his bar on the nights he knew she had events at other bars. So if she was doing a speed dating thing down the street, he would have 1, 2, but he self-managed it all and it was shit. His advertising was a vinyl banner out front. She finally got so pissed that she diverted some of her marketing budget to billboard advertising of the events. It just so happens that there was a digital billboard on the roof of the husband's bar. Since he leased, he had no control on what appeared on the sign. Now his pathetic little banner was dwarfed by a full-size digital billboard advertising better events than his. Think I don't speak English? Okay, I don't. Technically belongs to my husband, but I was there to witness the fun backstory. Backstory: my husband 36M is of Chinese descent but was born in America. He speaks perfect English without an accent, okay, an American accent, and is basically just a regular guy but does deal with his fair share of racism, both small and large, but he deals with it with grace. Last weekend we were at a new restaurant that had opened up, and after we sat down the waitress brought us our menus. She then said, in that condescending way Americans speak to non-English speakers, "Do you need anything?" My husband initially looked pissed, but then something sparkled in his eye. He turns to the waitress and very loudly says, in a very exaggerated Asian accent, "Help with menu." He then held the waitress captive for about 10 minutes, having her explain the whole menu to him dish by dish, occasionally having her repeat things. Then my husband looked at me and said again very loudly, "No good, we go." So we grabbed our stuff and walked out of the restaurant and went somewhere else. TL Doctor: if you play racist games you win racist prizes. Try to scam me on Facebook Marketplace? I'll scam you back. Long story short, I bought an ottoman on Facebook Marketplace that was leaking beads and was more or less broken. I noticed the next morning and messaged the seller about this and that I want to return it. Now I totally agree that this is my fault and I should have done my due diligence when I picked it up. However, after her message back to me, it was extremely clear she knew that this product was in fact broken and she was selling broken things on Facebook Marketplace. Initially she agreed for me to return it and gave me a time I could come by and return it. However, as it got closer to the time, she cancelled and kept delaying the days I could come and eventually said she will no longer take the return as she is moving and won't be able to resell it in time. After I messaged back asking why she would waste my time with this defective product, knowing she was never going to accept a return, she got extremely mean and rude. She sent me so many appalling messages that were uncalled for back-to-back. X200B now if she had told me no from the start, not wasted my time, wasn't so mean and clearly a scammer, or had not known that she was selling defective products, that would have been fine with me. However, since she wasted my time and knowingly sold me a bad product even though I should have checked it better, I wanted to make sure I got my refund and revenge. X200B so, first step was getting my refund. I figured since the listing was still up, I had a few of my friends message her about it on Facebook and say that they will pay more than what the item is listed for if she will hold the ottoman for them for a few days out. So eventually, with the incentive of a large offer for her broken product, she was too enticed to make more money and scam another poor soul. She messaged me back saying she changed her mind and will take my return, no apologies or anything. After I get my money back and return it, my friends who are offering to pay more for it keep delaying the times and days of when they can pick it up and eventually keep this going until she has to move out and throw the broken ottoman out. Later, I message her, "Good luck selling it," to insert my friend's name and block her. She ended up blocking my friend, which was the best satisfaction I could ask for knowing that she just got played and scammed back. Update: Grumpy Phil gets more mugs than he can handle. Back in December, I33F posted about how my Phil berated my husband 34 meters and me for being wasteful when he found out we were getting rid of an excessive amount of coffee mugs from our home. We originally planned on donating the mugs, but since Phil was greatly offended by us getting rid of them, he thought we were throwing them away even though we never even said that. We decided to gift him all 17 mugs for Christmas. He was not pleased. It's been about 4 months since this incident. Grumpy Phil eventually stopped trying to get us to take the mugs back and just accepted his new collection. My husband's family is rather large and we've celebrated a few birthdays these past few months. Phil has decided to include a coffee mug in people's presents. My husband and I each got one back on our birthdays. My little niece got one for her 4th birthday, and he even sent one to his ex-wife Mill for her birthday. It's become a running joke now that everyone will receive a mug and every mug will continue to be regifted. Phil's birthday is in June, so all of us plan on wrapping up the mugs we've been regifted and giving them back to Phil. Phil is still as grumpy as ever, but at least he turned this petty revenge into a funny family joke. Link to original. Went too far. My boss left me on the job site and left for the day at lunch. Turns out he was at the bar with my girlfriend drinking all day. They both lied about it and she actually stayed up there even after I got home. So I drove up to the bar and put a bunch of weed in my boss's truck and parked down the street. Finally, just before midnight they left, and so I called the cops and told them some maniac in a red Ford F-150 just ran me and another car off the road on 44th and Pennsylvania. Then I followed him while on the phone with the dispatcher. He was pulled over about a mile later and was charged with aggravated DUI and felony possession of drugs. My girlfriend beat me home and tried to yell at me for not being home, so I threw her car keys in the woods behind the house and acted like I hadn't seen them. When 6 inches costs $100 worth of lumber. So my neighbor and I live next to a light industrial area. Plumbers, electricians and painters. Good businesses, no problems with them. In fact, having a plumber nearby has been great. So I put up a small shed to store my lawnmower and tools near our property line. Fussy neighbor calls the county because it is too close to the property line and the county comes out and makes me move at 6. Not a huge deal. My mistake, but it was a pain. Fast forward 1 year and the neighbor built a new fence 8 tall to block his view of the industrial park. Good idea, but the county says the max is 6 and you need a permit to do so. Came home to him sawing off 2 along a 30 fence. I wonder how the county found out about this major infraction? Wi-Fi wars. Had a neighbor who disliked any dogs making any noise at all. His kids used to tease the dogs on one side to the point where the poor things barked anytime the kids came out. Anyway, Wi-Fi names became a thing. He used his new superpower to broadcast his demands for silence. I may have got a bit hammered and set ours up also in response. His one, keep dogs quiet mine, woof 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 childish, yes, petty, yes, harmless, no increase at all in my blood pressure. Stayed that way for ages. He buckled first. You are a terrible roommate. Let me help you. My freshman year of college I was placed with a highly incompatible roommate. Here is my elaborate and extremely petty revenge story, and how I got to move out. The players all 17-18F, all living on same floor except for Dasha me Colleen my roommate Karen friends with Colleen, roommates with Svetlana Karen's roommate, close friends with Dasha lived on different floor with Dasha lived on different floor with a truly awful roommate Jane my friend and future roommate Bonnie Jane's roommate with mental health struggles. The struggles me and Colleen are very incompatible and she was very shitty about it. Karen and Svetlana had no problems living together at all. Bonnie's mental health issues meant that it was not the right time for her to share a room with anyone. Dasha's roommate was having similar struggles, but refused to recognize them as such and blamed Dasha for absolutely wild and untrue things. The revenge I knew from day one that I did not like living with Colleen but got close to others on my hall quickly and wanted to stay. So, while I was cordial to her, things got increasingly volatile and the thing that broke me was when I went to bed one night at around 10 and she, Karen and another friend busted into our room, turned on the lights and started having a dance party with the sole purpose of laughing at me and telling me I was a loser for sleeping. It was the weirdest shit. But the following day, Jane told me Bonnie was moving to a psycho single and she worried about who would move in. I asked if she was cool if it was me. We spoke with the RA, and I started packing. Colleen was furious and that is when the plan came to me, fully baked. She and Karen were sitting in her bed, watching me pack and talking loudly about me and guessing about the psycho who would end up living there when I said you know, Karen can move in and be your roommate. Like, just go talk to the RA and have her move in. Then Dasha could move in with Svetlana. We all knew about Dasha's issues and you don't have to live with a rando. I knew Karen was a people pleaser, and though she already had doubts about Colleen, she wouldn't be able to resist helping Dasha and making Colleen happy. They spoke with the RA, and by that evening, Dasha was living with Svetlana, Karen and Colleen were together, and Jane and I had our room. Karen realized what a nightmare Colleen was and spent the rest of the year miserable, but was too much of a people pleaser to say anything about it. During graduation week, we did a floor reunion and Karen brought up the day we shuffled the rooms and the unexpected consequences. I told her they were not unexpected at all. I was just going to move in with Jane and let whatever happen. But you and Colleen were sitting there being such bitches that I decided you deserved each other. I knew that if I told you you could move in while you were in front of Colleen, you would have to do it, and I knew you would hate it. So, I did. The look on her face was so classic, like, she had spent weeks ganging up on me and being mean to me in my own room, and thought that I had made that recommendation out of the goodness of my heart. Bitch, please. You broke my fish tank? We all sank to the bottom. The last update. Hey mates, it's me, the psycho fish guy again. Hopefully this is the last time I have to post things here because I'm honestly sick of all of this, to be honest. So anyway, a couple of things has happened since the last post. For one, I told my girlfriend what I've done, and she, like a lot of you, wasn't very impressed. She said it was necessary to put my foot down, but destroying what of all that was left of her grandfather didn't make me any better than her. And although I wasn't concerned about being the better person, now that I had the time to process the whole thing, she has a point. Sure, her grandfather was an absolute slob of a human being that spent most of his life in prison, sexual harassment, and honestly hated her existence, but that was her ancestor, not mine. And who knows what memories they could have had when I wasn't on this earth. Prob not much, but I guess it's nothing wrong with loving a monster. Plus, there were several alternatives of revenge I could have done. I could have replaced her picture with one of Eclipse and hid the other one. I could just destroyed the frame to cause minimal damage. I could have even made a photocopy of it and tore that to give her a little scare, but not leave any permanent scars, but I didn't. And the fact that destroying essentially her family relic was the first thought I had, and I didn't even reconsider it for a single second, or even feel bad when hearing her in straight anguish, actually has me concerned. So that's why I've talked to my uncle about getting into therapy of some sorts. I don't want to end up the same person as my aunt. And since we are on the topic of my aunt, she's gone. Just about an hour and a half ago, I got a call from my uncle. He told me that for my and his safety, she is no longer welcome at this home, and by the time I get home today, her and all her belongings will be out of the house. Kinda of ironic, isn't it? I don't know if they got into an argument, or if he found out about something, or maybe he's been trying to find an excuse to do this for a while. P.S. They are not married. so it's not gonna be a divorce. And to put it frankly, I don't know how to feel. I feel like shit because I know this is all my fault. Maybe if I didn't get so angry and be a better person, this wouldn't have happened. But at the same time, maybe this is the start of a new beginning. Maybe I can spend the last of my childhood in peace and not have to worry about privacy or boundaries. And as for my aunt, part of me hopes she gets hit by a bus and becomes left to rot, but another part of me genuinely wishes the best for her. After all, she wasn't always a bad person. We actually had some great moments in life. Hopefully she can reunite with her family and find some other item of her grandfather's. I doubt it, but it's always nice to have faith. X200B at the end of the day, I think this honestly the best way this could have ended. No one got hurt, no one is in trouble with the law, and no one is homeless. That last one is a bit iffy, but I doubt my uncle would put her out if she didn't have nowhere else to go. Long story short, I could have done something far less harmful, but that's the only way some people learn. Fire with fire. X200B and I wanted to address some things, answer some questions. I'm 17 years old. He'll be 18 in a few months. I plan on getting another fish, but not at least for another 6 weeks so we can properly set up everything. I think I'm gonna leave it at my girlfriend's house, just to be safe. I was thinking of naming it Daybreak, but I don't know yet. To the people that claims this is fake, why the actual fuck would I waste time out of my day to intentionally taint my and my family in front of millions of strangers who most likely could give a shit less if I even wake up the next morning? To those who claim I have autism, I don't. I have ADHD, but why does that matter? Are you saying that to be funny? Because if that's the case, you're not funny. Listen, I love fucked up humor as much as the next person, but neurodivergency jokes aren't funny. That and cancer jokes are very fucked up. Most of you here are grown-ass adults, and the fact that you resort to that to insult an adolescent really shows your character. To the people who were saying I need therapy, I can't thank you enough. For once I feel that I'm going to get some help that will help me further down the road. I know, my writing style is inaccurate and kinda cringy, but it gets the point across, doesn't it? Some of y'all didn't even fully read it anyway. I honestly can't thank you all enough. For those who think him their hero or leech of financial dependency, I enjoying laughing and reminiscing at the comments. I've learned some valuable lessons, but most importantly, I feel whole again. Swim in peace, Eclipse. Hope this is the end of it. Until next time, mates. You took apart my fish tank? We both sink to the bottom. Update. Now, what you've all been waiting for. The update. X200B. So, about 2 hours after posting the OG, she got home and saw the carnage of my actions. And I never heard such a shrill scream in my life. And what's make it worse is that I couldn't help. X200B, you see, this isn't the first time she's disregarded something of mine. This will be the last, though what makes this different is that it's a living animal involved. She ridiculed my girlfriend in public. She's took $100 my cousin got for me for my beat and held on to it. That was a year and a half ago. She's misplaced a scrapbook full of letters from my mother during her stay at the nursing home. She passed away in 2019, and none of those incidents got responses from me. At the time, I thought everything was happening for a reason, but this was the last time I was gonna sit there and do shit about it. X200B, you see, I've something about people. The only language that everyone truly knows and understands is violence. X200B. Anyway, she started crying. Cried so much, she could fill her own damn aquarium. Once she got done bawling her eyes out, she stormed into my room and questioned me about it. I simply told her, doesn't feel good, does it? To have your shit disregarded? I bet it doesn't. Besides, didn't your grandpa hate you because you refused to look after his grandson? He never wanted to see you again. That includes beyond the grave. She then proceeded to threaten to have me arrested for destruction for property. I argued that I could do the same for animal cruelty abuse. After an hour or so of this, she finally said that one day you're gonna learn to stop touching people's shit, and proceeded to leave the room. I responded, and you learned that lesson today. X200B. Was that disrespectful? Oh, for sure. You can call me a monster, an asshole, a demon, a piece of shit. All the above for all I care. None of that stopped me from having something I haven't had in a while. A good night's sleep. X200B. Now some people were saying that the fish was good as dead anyway. And yes, I bought the fish not knowing what it needed. So I went to my friends over in our Betta-Fish, and they gave me the idea of a makeshift tank. And yes, everything was perfectly safe for Eclipse. The plastic storage bin was cleaned and rinsed and filled with room temp water along with the water conditioner. It had the coffee mug to hide in. It had the sponge and air pump as the filter. It had a small heater next to it, not too close, didn't want to melt a hole in it. It even had some sand in it. Sure, it wasn't the best thing, but I can assure you, if she didn't touch that tank, it'll still be alive today. X200B. You can also argue that I only had it for a day. Why does that matter? If you had a puppy for a day, and your loved one took away everything it needed and left it outside, how would you feel? Some people would say they aren't the same thing, but it is. They're living beings, creatures that could have lasted years, things that people love, things that people care for. X200B. If that makes me a psychopath, then lock me the fuck up, because I'm sick of people disregarding my belongings. X200B. Swim in peace. Eclipse. X200B. PS. I think I need to point out that my aunt doesn't own the house. My uncle does. And he already told me I'm not going anywhere, so I don't need to worry about that. X200B. X200B. You took apart my fish tank? We both sink to the bottom. So to keep it simple, yesterday, I got a Siamese fighting fish, or known as a betta fish, named Eclipse. Due to obvious reasons, I unfortunately didn't have a proper aquarium for it, so I made one out of a large storage container from Home Depot, plastic, a coffee mug, sponge filter, air pump, and a little bit of sand. Wasn't perfect, but it would do until then. So my aunt complains earlier this morning that why you got this big ass container for this small ass fish and it don't need all that shit. For those who don't know, betta fish need at least a 5-gallon tank, so I tried explaining to her that this isn't one of those carnival goldfish and needs certain criteria to thrive. Didn't work. X200B. Anyway, I leave off of school. I get a call from my girlfriend, God I fucking love her, that I can have her old 30-gallon aquarium filter and heater. I leave 2 hours early from school to put Eclipse in his new home, only to find that she took upon herself to dismantle my makeshift fish tank piece by piece, leaving Eclipse dead in a Tupperware bowl filled with freezing cold water in the middle of my bedroom floor. When I confronted her, she said, I told you her don't need all that shit, and that's what fish do. They swim and die. Bet. X200B. So once she left to run errands, I went into the living room and grabbed her picture of her deceased grandfather, the only thing she has left related to him, and I dismantled the frame, bit by bit. And when she comes back home, where she's gonna find the picture? At the bottom of the bowl, torn in shreds, in freezing cold water, in the middle of her bedroom floor. X200B. Sure, it might be a fish, but it was my fish, my money, my joy. Literally murdered in cold blood. Vape. Tonight she's gonna learn just how little things can make a big difference. Swim in peace. Eclipse, who lasted as long as her namesake. You work late? Great. The gardener is coming at 8 a.m. now. So, I've written before about my neighbors who cut down all the greenery between our houses, so my wife put the bins in such a way that that's now what they see when they leave their house. The latest twist is that the gardener, who has petrol mowers and trimmers, asked if he could come earlier on Mondays, so I've said as early as you like, which will be 8 a.m. Mondays. The things is, terrible neighbors work in hospitality and hotel management, so don't get in from work until about 3 a.m. on a Monday morning. Enjoy the mower starting up at 8 a.m. Your appointment is now cancelled. You really never realize something is gonna go on, as long as it does, until you look back. 2 years ago, I was given a new me phone number when I purchased a cell phone. Immediately, I was bombarded by friends, family, and collection agents of the previous owner of the number, not the phone. They were all looking for the same woman, by name. First couple of months, I answered that person must have changed their number, that I just got this number with a new phone. No harm, no foul, but it hasn't stopped. And I found out why she is still giving out this number. One day, she logged into her name redacted coffee app, and it sent this phone the sign-up code. I bounced to it and logged in with the code. The account had her email address. Finally, I can let her know what's going on and hopefully stop this crap. I used that info to contact her. I told her, I'm sure she didn't mean any harm, but it's become ridiculous. Please stop giving out this number. She replied that I'm some kind of stalker freak. I replied that if she continues to give out my number, I will cancel every appointment that comes across, and tell family she died, and tell creditors where to find her. She blocked my email. I figured, all is well if she stops. She didn't. Okay, bet. A month ago, her application for a school was cancelled. Today, her dental appointment for Thursday was cancelled. Stop sending your crap to my number. I plan to finally change this number when I get a personal issue resolved. But honestly, I'm low-key enjoying this. And she's still giving out the number, so. Edit. So, I had someone warning me that I was gonna go to federal prison for 25 years for this. Guys, I'm only reacting to her actions. It is easily provable, with the email I have, and the dates, that she continues to give out this number, that she is the harasser. If she goes to a new drive, and gives this number, that's harassment to me. Writing a C to reply to a text is not a federal crime. Chill. Edit. 2. I'm tired and was just venting, cause the final straw happened today. To those of you saying this likely didn't happen, seriously? I guess all the commenters are liars. 2. Can we all just get along? Not everything is a conspiracy. I'm going to bed. Y'all keep fighting the bad guys and Team FCK Rocco.